hovering at minus 12 decibels. We're go.
My fellow Americans, we have the best coronavirus. We have the best global pandemic. We have the best health threats. We have the best hotspots. We have the best infection. We have the best school closures. We have the best social distancing. We have the best leaders of health insurance industry. We have the best surprise medical billing. We have the best massive amounts of red tapes available in record time. Our future remains brighter than anyone can imagine. God bless you and God bless America. Okay.
Welcome to the Young Turks. That's the show you're watching. This might be the last day that we do the show in studio. As I've been warning everyone, we've been working on the tech to be able to do this show and give you new content every day remotely. Nando Vila, Francesca Fiorentini, I really love you guys and respect you for being here today.
Likewise. You know, the people need to hear the real news.
The real news.
The truth.
Yes, and there's a lot of that today. So we did cover the elections yesterday, but we will talk about them a little more today, especially when it comes to Bernie Sanders and what the path will be moving forward. But as you could expect, the entire rundown is really dominated with coronavirus news. We have many updates, including updates on the economy and what Congress has accomplished and is working on to provide some economic relief to Americans. But as always, use the hashtag TYT Live to communicate with us during the show. And if you're a member, we do read your member comments. And please help support the show. I know it's a difficult time for everyone, but we wouldn't be able to give you the real news if it weren't for our members and for everyone who's supporting us, including those who contribute to tyt.com/go. That's our fundraising effort in order to keep TYT sustainable for the upcoming year. With that said, let's talk about what's happening with the economy and how politicians are trying to do their best to help us. The Trump administration has finally signed the Defense Protection Act. Not signed it, but essentially decided to invoke it. And this is really a wartime act that gives the executive branch some power, some authority to pressure private industry, in some cases even coerce private industry into producing products that are necessary to cope with a crisis. So right now we're dealing with a serious shortage of certain medical supplies, including masks, ventilators, respirators. And so the Trump administration has decided to use this Defense Production Act in order to pressure private industry to produce more of these products. Now, in this case, the DPA, as it's called, would allow the United States government to incentivize a company who already makes emergency medical supplies to make more of them. And this makes a lot of sense. This was something that Trump was resistant to for some reason in the beginning, but he did announce that he will invoke it today. Take a look.
We'll be invoking the Defense Production Act just in case we need it. In other words, I think you all know what it is, and it can do a lot of good things if we need it, and we will have it all completed, signing it in just a little while. Right after I'm finished with this conference, I'll be signing it. It's prepared to go.
Okay, so I want to get into like the serious details about the shortages and how it's important that he invoke this. But I can't help but comment on like the way he delivers anything, right?
It's so
He's
bizarre.
Like, you all know what that is. No, but here's the issue. I'm sure some of the reporters in that press gaggle do know what it is, but he doesn't know what it is, right? Like that's why he doesn't want to explain what it is.
I think you're giving the White House press corps way too much credit.
Maybe I am. Maybe I am.
They do not have any idea until maybe like 5 minutes ago what that was.
No, he clearly had like a little line, a description about like what the Defense Production Act was, and he was just like, I'm gonna skip over this, too many words, and you all know what it is. And like he's basically, and this is the thing about Trump and media disinformation that I find really upsetting is that in the same breath that he can mock news for actually doing their job, he's not providing the information that a president needs to provide. So just in that example, he's essentially saying, I'm relying on you guys.
Yeah,
he's
look,
admitting that.
Especially when it comes to this act, what it means, what it does, how it impacts not just private industry, but like how do you support those efforts, right? To produce more of the medical supplies that we need. But I think the issue with Trump is he's been so incredibly hostile toward the media. He's been so bad at communicating things. But in the last few days, and believe me, I'm not doing a Dana Bash thing here, right? I'm not giving him like a world of credit and saying like, oh, he's so presidential. No, what I am saying though is, oh wow, he's actually holding press conferences daily now, right? Low bar, but at least there's some information coming through, and I'm more interested to hear what the professionals surrounding him have to say, right? Because they do luckily convey important information that we need to know. Now, let me give you some of the numbers when it comes to what we're experiencing with shortages and what we might have to deal with very soon. So the number of cases in the United States when it comes to coronavirus is over 5,300 by Tuesday afternoon. So that was yesterday. And it's on the same trajectory as in many other countries, including Italy, which now has more than 30,000 cases. And keep in mind that Italy was slow to respond and react to coronavirus, which is why their healthcare system is overwhelmed and overburdened. So this is something that he should have invoked much earlier. There were both Democrats and Republicans urging him to do it. For some reason, he was resistant to it, but luckily he did invoke it today.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it has to be done. I mean, this is this goes back to like the World War II example. Like FDR famously, basically just took over entire industries, compelled private companies to make tanks and planes and stuff. Like at one point, he said like, we're going to make 50,000 planes this year, and all his advisors were like, I don't know if we can do that. He's like, if they try hard enough, I'm sure they can. And it goes back to this. It's something that we haven't had in a long time in the United States, which is that the government actually has the power to compel private corporations to do the things it needs to do to serve a public interest, right? A private corporation would never serve the public interest for any reason. I mean, the only thing they can do is make as much profit as possible. The only entity powerful enough to channel the production capabilities of a private corporation towards some social benefit, like in this case, making masks, ventilators, all that stuff, is through pure coercion. And this is like the way to do it. And so it's a no-brainer. I mean, they haven't really like done anything with it yet, but they're gonna probably have to. I mean,
and this is really the only option at this point. I was reading about how because Trump was so slow to take coronavirus seriously, he didn't pursue some of the medical supplies that were already out on the market, and they were purchased by other countries, understandably so.
Yeah.
And so we can't blame those other countries. They're trying to protect their public the best they can. And so I'm glad that Trump did invoke the Defense Production Act because they need to produce more of these medical supplies to keep people alive.
I just think it's great that for the first time in a very long time, our war effort isn't actually going to fight a war.
That's a good point.
Many of the past few wars have been based based on utter BS, but obviously not World War II. And like, it is kind of nice so that we can look back on our history. And I think it is right to look at coronavirus as an enemy, not a Wuhan or a Chinese enemy, as Pompeo literally just said the other day, stoking xenophobia, but really looking at it as a national mobilization and a national effort, and like, oh my God, maybe we'll get a more comprehensive healthcare program when this is all done. And I would argue that it's progressives' jobs at this moment to make that case for Medicare for all.
Yeah, I mean, for better or worse, we have this enormous military that has been used to murder people around the world for decades and decades for no reason. But in the short term, we can turn our tons of military bases into temporary hospitals, like use the Army Corps of Engineers to become healthcare workers, all manner of stuff. Like turn that capability into dealing with the immediate crisis, because it's one of the largest parts of our federal government right now, and it can be mobilized at a moment's notice.
Yeah, so absolutely. And so one final statistic to share with you all, just to show you how dire this situation is. I'm gonna go jump ahead to the last graphic here. There are about 160,000 ventilators which assist sick patients with their breathing, but as many as 740,000 could be needed. So that's how dire the situation is. So this was the right call by Trump. I wish he made the call earlier. He was resistant to it before, and he was reported as saying, we'll make that decision pretty quickly if we need it. We hope we don't need it. It's a big step.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it is a big step. I mean, we've for so many decades we've internalized the idea that the government has no control over corporations, and it does. It really does. I mean, it's the only entity that does. So maybe silver lining when we get past this will be one of the small ways in which we get over that mentality for once and for all.
Also, put the Amish to work. Like, what are they doing? Like, are they still making quilts really in the middle of a pandemic?
That sounds
Make
lovely.
some masks, quilt some masks, okay? If you're Amish and you're watching, which you're not, but spread the word.
Get it to them. Do they even know about coronavirus?
I don't even know how your mind went to the Amish.
They've been practicing social distancing for way too long.
They're gonna be the healthiest people. They're gonna inherit the earth.
They're the only ones who are gonna survive.
They're gonna be like they're gonna like wander into some city, and it's gonna be like just a couple of zombies, and they're like, what
the
happened
Amish come
here?
out with a bunch of quilts, like what?
If that's what it takes to survive, I will become Amish. Like, I don't know how I'm gonna make money because everything I do goes against what they believe.
Can you grow a beard though?
Can you churn butter?
No, thankfully. Can I what?
Churn butter.
I'd like to try.
Yeah, exactly.
That
Well,
sounds
you'll
fun.
have plenty of time at home to do that, Anna.
Listen to Weird Al Yankovic. He knows how to become Amish.
All right, well, let's move on to an important economic update. So, new polling by NPR and PBS indicates that many Americans are already significantly impacted by the coronavirus, economically speaking. So this poll was taken between March 13th and 14th, and here are the results. The coronavirus pandemic has already started to hit American pocketbooks, with nearly 1 in 5 households experiencing a layoff or a reduction in work hours. Now, keep in mind that this poll was pretty much taken before the Trump administration started taking coronavirus seriously. So I'm sure that if these same individuals were polled today, the results would be even worse. Now, lower income workers were the most affected. A quarter of households making less than $50,000 had experienced cut hours or a job loss. And that's not surprising. Usually low wage workers don't have the ability to do their jobs from home. They're usually blue collar workers who have to be at the workplace. And so if we're, shutting everything down, practicing social distancing, they don't have the ability to do their jobs.
Right.
It's such a devastating story. Also, Steve Mnuchin has been saying some promising things. I'm skeptical of anyone in government, to be honest with you. But here's what he said: Americans need cash now, and the president wants to give cash now. And I mean now, in the next 2 weeks. But here's the thing, privately, with lawmakers, however, Mnuchin said checks might not be available until the end of April.
What?
Now, today, the Treasury Department did unveil what they're referring to as like phase 3 of economic relief for Americans. And so the Treasury Department unveiled to lawmakers a plan for $250 $250 billion in direct payments to Americans beginning April 6th. So we'll see how that really plays out, but it does seem like for the first time in a long time, there really is a bipartisan effort to offer relief to Americans, which it sucks that it takes a crisis for that to happen, but that's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Mnuchin game is a very clever one in which, like, publicly, him and the Trump administration are taking the initiative, really, like saying these big things, like we're going to provide cash payments to Americans now and all that stuff. But then privately, they're kind of nickel and diming all these proposals. They're even the first initial kind of paid sick leave thing was nickel and dime by the Republicans at the last second.
Right.
But and this is what's so frustrating about our current Democratic leaders. Like Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House is an incredibly powerful person. The Speaker of the House can basically pass legislation because they have a majority in the House.
Right.
So why, I don't understand, well, I do understand it, but I'm gonna play devil's advocate. Why don't they seize the initiative on these big transformational things now? Like they can pass these laws in the House and then dare Republicans to pass them.
You mean beyond sort of the individual payments to Americans?
Yes, but be out there being like, we need, massive relief for families right now. We're going to provide universal sick leave, regardless of employment status. We're going to provide, free healthcare right now. Like all these things can be, like these transformational things can be. This is such a grave moment. It's such a large crisis that we can't even wrap our minds around it. The moral moment to seize right now is that, but instead they're all doing this thing where they're like, you know what, we like this idea of the cash payments, but we're gonna limit it to people under $100,000, and that creates all kinds of problems. And then we're gonna, it's like, why are you doing that?
I think part of the problem is they don't have to worry about not earning a salary, right?
Themselves.
They're still collecting their salaries. They still have government issued healthcare.
Yeah.
I think that, and Nancy Pelosi has been a politician for like 180 years, right? So, and it's not just about Pelosi, it's about all of those politicians who are doing the nickel and diming. I think that they're completely disconnected from the average American worker who's terrified for good reason right now.
Who's out of work.
Yeah, and by the way, I just want to, if this all sounds apocalyptic or maybe we're over exaggerating, no, this is really what we're dealing with right now. And Bill de Blasio gave an interview to MSNBC. People were alarmed by it, but I think he makes a good point here. Take a look.
$1,000 in people's pockets is not enough. It's not going to allow people to stay whole and be able to afford the basics in life. Washington has to get real. If we're going to have an unemployment level that looks like the Great Depression, we need a massive federal relief program that looks like the Great Depression so people are kept whole economically or they will not have money for food or medicine. That's what I fear.
So the fact that he mentioned Great Depression, made people, I guess, alarmed, worried, but they should be alarmed and worried because if you just take a good hard look at the direction we're going in, our entire economy, everything's shut down.
The entire planet.
Yes.
Like the global economy is shutting down.
Yes. And I think there's a lot of pieces to pick up on, but for me, the way that we are worse off than during the Great Depression is that our economies are vastly more integrated globally, right? And of course, we know that environmental and labor organizations in the late 90s were fighting against those policies in every country around the world. And many economists continue to say and said then that when you incorporate economies, you make everyone more vulnerable. It's essentially like the way that a ship, right? I remember this metaphor of like a ship, and like if one part of the ship takes on water, they have it closed off so that the other parts of the ship will not sink and sort of like protects, a ship from sinking, blah, blah, blah. Well, now essentially with a globalized economy, you remove all those barriers so that if one part of the ship goes down, the entire ship, or takes on water, the entire ship is going down. That is what is happening with our economy. The fact that we don't have respirators, ventilators, masks, face masks, we don't even produce those things in a non-xenophobic way, may I say. Americans should produce those things, like
That's a really good point.
Say both things.
But you're absolutely right. We have outsourced so much of our production and manufacturing because these companies are looking for cheap labor, right? And they don't want to abide by the labor laws that we have in this country. But at the same time, one thing that I think is damaging about Trump and the messaging that we've heard from him since 2015 is this like nationalistic approach. Because globalization has happened already, and we're all very much we're all connected. our economies are intertwined, and supply chains, like we depend on, the supplies that are manufactured in other countries. So there is no America first, we're the greatest. We are not independent. We are very much reliant on other countries, which is why, his approach has been damaging from the get-go, but it's especially damaging now when it's become abundantly clear that we need to work with other countries and make sure that we find a solution that makes the world whole,
Well, that's why more rational economic planning from governments is necessary. There are certain products that are vital to the health of a citizenry, and they can't be reliant on. It's fine if we make iPhones in China, in theory.
I did not expect that from you, but I hear what you're saying.
In theory, that they're not if the global supply chain kind of breaks down for iPhones, it's not the end of the world.
They're not essential. Are you saying
an
iPhone is non-essential right now?
Yeah, but aside from slave labor and all that stuff, imagine there was some sort of
worker protection,
and so that's no big deal. But healthcare,
respirators,
health materials, those things are needed when they're needed in the place that they're needed. They can't be dependent on if some natural catastrophe, which are going to start happening more and more with climate change, happens in some part of the global supply chain on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
These countries need to have the local capabilities to produce things when they need them, when they're essential.
Yeah.
But de Blasio mentioning the New Deal, I think, is really important, and obviously in a time when the Green New Deal, we're talking about the New Deal again, thanks to the Green New Deal and thanks to how we approach mitigating the impact of climate change. But it's important, yes, FDR mobilized and compelled a lot of private enterprises to produce things that the country needed, but also there was tons of resistance in Congress.
Oh,
and
definitely.
I know you mentioned that,
and the Supreme Court.
Right, and so the New Deal went through phases, and the first phase was definitely just about protecting business. And then the second phase was okay, we need a National Labor Relations Board and a Fair Labor Practices Act or whatever it was. We need to actually protect workers. And so this is going to be, I do think we're gonna see more than a recession, far more than a recession. And so I think this fight is for the long haul. Hopefully, people, not the Pelosi's, right, but people like, AOC or the new class of progressive Congress people can put some pressure, because apparently Pelosi's got a plan that is supposed to appeal to some of her Republican colleagues around healthcare.
Of course, and I don't even want to say appeal to her Republican colleagues, to appeal to her donors
and her ideology.
And her ideology,
and very deeply ingrained ideology.
Because she was running this, she's going to roll it out soon, and it will be once again more money over to the private sector.
Definitely. Look, she was willing to hold up economic relief in order to do economic relief for Americans. Workers, right? In order to do means testing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to do this. I don't think we should. No. The moment is now. The crisis is now. We can't play games and dilly dally and do means testing. First of all, universally, everyone, regardless of how much money they make, the economy is stopped. No one's making money.
Her defense was so infuriating. Her defense was so infuriating and so telling. She said, I don't want to use US taxpayer money to subsidize corporations to do paid sick leave when they should be doing it themselves. And it's they need to step up to the plate and do it themselves. It's well, they're not going to do it.
There's no liquidity.
So what are
they have no cash.
And they have no incentive to.
Why would they?
Which on its face, I agree with. I agree with that, but it shouldn't be as an excuse to hold up
but they're not
funding.
They're not going to do it on their own.
That's not her long game isn't to then get Amazon to provide more sick leave or McDonald's or whomever.
Well, you can compel them. You can write a law saying that if you want to do business in the United States and you're of a certain size or whatever, you need to provide this. Companies won't do that because they're good.
Yeah.
They'll do it because they're forced to by a more powerful entity, and the only more powerful entity is the federal government.
So I do want to provide some more details into what has been accomplished and what people are eyeing, moving forward with the economy. So the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, will postpone the April 15th tax payment deadline. Individuals have another 90 days to pay their 2019 income tax bills. By the way, for the first time ever, I regret not being a procrastinator because I've paid my taxes.
You already did it?
Yeah, of course I did. As soon as I turned that check in, right? Trump does the press conference where he's taking coronavirus seriously, and I was like, oh my God, do I cancel it? What do I do now?
Yeah.
Anyway, so some Democrats, including what we heard from de Blasio, want to do more than $1,000 a month for workers while this pandemic continues. So Cory Booker, for instance, and Michael Bennet and Sherrod Brown propose spending $2,000 or sending $2,000 to every adult and child below a set income. So that's the means testing we were talking about earlier, with future payments in July. And then quarterly until unemployment levels drop off after an expected rise. So the thing that I like about that proposal is it's not a one-time thing, because we don't know how long this is gonna last. It's probably gonna last months. So a one-time $1,000 check is gonna it's gonna help a little bit, but it's not nearly enough. So
I wanted to just mention that I think, and I'm afraid that Republicans will capitalize on this moment more than Democrats.
Oh, they have been.
They're already doing it.
Right, and they're already doing it, right? And I don't mean to say that people don't deserve money immediately and in their hands, and I know we talked about UBI and whether it's good. I think that, yes, divorced from that broader conversation, you need to get money into the hands of Americans. I just don't want to roll into November and have Trump and the Republicans be the party that did that, and Democrats not able to mount any kind of opposition, like, yes,
to
we
show
support
that they're the ones that are looking out for the working
Yes,
class, and they have not made that case.
But there could be an arms race to help people, right? Like if the Republicans say we're gonna give $1,000 or whatever they say, like a smart Democrat that was politically savvy would be like, well, I say, $10,000.
Like de Blasio did, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
And I say, a moratorium on rents, and I'm gonna cancel student debt for the extent of the crisis.
Obviously, you risk it not getting passed.
Well, but you pass it yourself. You control the House.
Sure.
Yeah,
you pass it yourself.
Then you tell
say,
the
look,
Senate,
I passed this law.
The ball's in your court.
The Republicans control the Senate and the presidency. Do you want to do this for the American worker or not? Like, that's the thing. And this obsession with means testing is so stupid. It's so counterproductive, because what it does is it adds layers and layers of bureaucracy. It makes people like, oh, do I qualify for this or not? Like anyone who's dealt with like Medicaid, that's near that. It's like, it's a goddamn nightmare. So what you do is you give it to everyone. And if you don't want to like subsidize billionaires or whatever you say, then you recover that in taxes through progressive taxation. So you pay out the cash payment and then you recover it in taxes. That's how you do it in a smart way. You sign the check for everyone and then you're recovered in taxes later. It's just so simple.
There's this scary window where you're seeing, like, if Democrats don't see this opportunity, Republicans are going to, and Trump will forever tell us that he's the person who gave us $2,000 or $1,000, out of the goodness of his rotting heart.
They understand politics
a little better,
and messaging, not a little better, I think a lot better. And they've been dominating the conversation when it comes to
providing
relief.
Here's an example. Like, they just announced the stop on foreclosures.
Right.
That's something that the Obama administration didn't even do in 2012 during the foreclosure crisis, which harmed millions of Americans, and caused untold economic harm. They just announced it today. Like,
right, yeah.
Yeah, so I was gonna get to that, but I'm glad that you mentioned it. So the Trump administration has also put a halt on foreclosures. So that's also a little bit of good news. But again, going to your point, this is something that should have been pushed for by Democrats. And they keep talking about electability when it comes to the candidate that they've propped up. But it's not just about their perspective on who's more electable. It's also about having a message that resonates with the working class, that they can really like have some receipts to show for, right?
For sure.
And right now, I think that they're failing miserably, to say the least. We got to take a break, but you do not want to miss this next story. My favorite Bernie is Salty Bernie, and you're about to get a little taste of that when we return.
Old school's pitched to me from Jank. It'll just be me, you, Jesus, Ben, and maybe Michael. And we're like, okay, cool. I can do that every week. As you can see, me, Jesus, Ben.
When you make the order, it says, don't exceed $20.01. So I'll just order literally anything to get it as close to that as I possibly can.
I'm sorry that I ordered $45 worth of food and got an email saying, sir, would you like to rethink that? What are you talking about?
I was in hell. I was just like, oh my God, the theater's empty, nobody's here. Everyone on screen keeps fucking cursing. Why did I let this happen? And the whole thing looks like it was shot through a glass of milk. My mom's gonna be so mad.
If you're looking for a heart attack, the short way, baby.
Wrong.
wrong. I did put mayonnaise on it. I'm the most in shape, overweight person you'll find.
That's right.
He was like, why didn't you answer my call? I called you 39 times.
Yuck.
But what makes you stop right before 40? You know, what makes you say, nah, man, I ain't doing that no more. I'm cool.
And I called you back on the air. And I was like, okay, Kevin Smith, big shot. What the you said you'd come on and you didn't come on.
I'm sure I took that very well.
Yeah, you did. You called me back the next day and said, I thought it was 7 a.m. And there's now deep fake porn. I don't know if you guys have heard of this.
I heard of it. I just had some in the car.
I'll tell you who I'm not Ben Mankiewicz. Have you guys ever felt that?
Not ever.
And now it's just the three of us.
This is the intimate hour.
By the way, the last half hour of this, we're not even rolling.
Fair enough.
Hey, man.
Easily.
See, I watch movies.
I'm done with both of you.
Once Greg starts laughing, I can't stop. And I was just gonna ask you about getting high.
Snoogans, Snoochie Boochies. And members, of course, you can get the whole damn thing. TYT.com, join and free trial. I'm old school with the old folks.
Good.
John, come back.
Electric cars are awesome, but they aren't the best tool for every job. You can't park them on the edge of the sidewalk while you run into the store for a few things. On top of that, an electric car is just financially out of reach for many people. That's where Zoom electric scooters come in. When I say electric scooter, I'm talking about small motorcycles with space in front of you to put your feet. The Zoom scooter has a range of 60 miles, offers a smooth ride up to 40 miles per hour, and can be charged from any electrical outlet. Start saving on gas while reducing your carbon footprint. To find out more, go to tyt.com/Zoom. Enter the code TYT50 to get an additional discount.
I'm Brett. I would like to refer to this segment as the Do I Still Have This Talent show. So I want to see if I can play harmonica without my hands. I don't know why I have that. Nothing's gonna be more impressive than that. I can also spin a basketball on my finger. While drinking. I'm gonna spin a basketball on my finger while drinking apple juice. You can do this, dude. It's also flat. I don't know if that helps or hurts. And it seems to be somewhat wobbly. Ta-da! Nope, I don't know how to do this one. This one's a fail. Nope. Oh God, I'm so mad.
Join TYT to stay updated on the 2020 election season. We'll be covering primary nights, debates, and everything in between. Here's what that coverage schedule currently looks like. To get full access and support independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Anna, Nando, and Francesca with you. So I want to read some TYT lives. Melissa writes in and says, that audible what? Perfectly lined up with the what my brain was screaming at me. I don't remember which one.
I don't remember who said the what.
Are these older comments? No, these are new. Write back and tell us what you mean by that. By the way, from our members' comments, Pocket in a Pocket asked, is Cenk okay? Is he still in the TYT bunker from yesterday? Cenk is okay. He had a tooth infection, which has been dealt with, but apparently it was so painful that he shouldn't have been on the show at all yesterday, but he couldn't help himself. And so talking as much as he did set him back, okay? But he's fine, he's healthy, he's just recovering, and he'll be back on the show in no time. Pork Chop Express says, a shortage of supplies, even though we knew about this how long ago? More irresponsibility. I'm sure he'll also take credit for this act, even though he did nothing at the beginning. Yeah, that's how Trump does things. I mean, he thinks that the government's response to this pandemic has been a 10 out of 10. Like, He's ridiculous. Gabby Marita says, this might be the first time Trump's realized being president is an actual job. You're right. I've noticed that as well. It almost feels like
when you gotta get out of bed at a certain time. Can't watch TV all day.
You know how we all have like, I don't know if we all have it, but there's usually like a defining moment or phase in everyone's life where they're forced to mature, right? They have to really take responsibility or they're forced to mature. It's usually like when you're a teenager or something. I feel like it happened to Trump like yesterday.
3 days ago,
Yeah.
No, he's like at like 8 years old. He's finally object permanence is like setting in. The world doesn't stop when he leaves the room, etc. It's very, very scary. I mean, that's why people are saying he looks presidential. It's like obviously because someone just briefed him on the fact that we could have 2.2 million cases in this country if we don't take precautions 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. It's just, anyway. All right, well, I wanted to make one other announcement before we move on to my favorite story of the day. So, if you are subscribed to TYT on YouTube, did you know that you usually do not get any type of notification about our content unless you ring the bell? So there's like a little bell feature on YouTube that we want to show you. And really the only way for you to be updated about everything that we do here at TYT is for you to just click on that bell. And if you do so, you'll get those notifications. So let's take a look at that page, little cursor, there it is. So you subscribe. And then after you subscribe, there's a little bell right there, right? You gotta click on that bell, guys. Click on it, and then you'll get notified every time we post a video or have an announcement for the show. And that also really helps the show, right? Like, so do it. Ring the bell. You can ring my bell. Ring my bell.
Do we have to pay royalties for this?
I think we do.
Yeah.
I think that was awesome.
Don't talk about our singing. Please don't talk about our singing.
Good harmonization over here between you two. Yeah.
I'm a terrible singer, so I thank you for that compliment. All right, well, let's move on to Salty Bernie. Bernie Sanders had an interesting interaction with CNN's Manu Raju today. Now, this was during a press conference that Sanders was holding in an effort to, inform the public on updates regarding COVID-19, the coronavirus. And so there's been a lot of pressure for Bernie Sanders to drop out of the race, especially after, what happened on Super Tuesday. It was not a good day for him. Yesterday during the primaries, also not a good day for him. And so, the Democratic establishment, along with members of the media, are urging him, like, when are you gonna drop out? When are you gonna drop out? So during this very important, critical press conference for a lot of people, right? They wanna know what's going on with COVID-19. Apparently Manu Raju asked about the election and Bernie didn't like it. So the first I learned of this was through a tweet by Eric Brandner, who's a national political reporter for CNN. He tweeted, Bernie Sanders, when Manu Raju asked his time frame for a decision, and this is what he was quoted as saying, I'm dealing with an effing global crisis, and he actually said the word.
Redacted.
Right now, I'm trying to do my best to make sure that we don't have an economic meltdown and that people don't die. Is that enough for you to keep me busy for today? I personally love that response, right? Yeah. But that's me. Manu Raju shared his own tweets on this, so let me give you some more details. He says the blowup occurred about halfway through a 5-minute gaggle where Sanders talked about the unprecedented crisis of our lifetime, calling for a range of measures that the United States government should take in the midst of the economic crisis. Then Lisa Mascaro asked what he's saying to his supporters, and he sidestepped the question. So she's obviously asking about like, hey, what are you telling your supporters about this race? Noting he sent out a statement. Then I asked about his time frame, and he was furious. Afterwards, he mellowed out and answered questions about the crisis for about 2 more minutes. So I have some issues with Manu Raju, nothing personal, just he's lied about things in the past, about interactions that he's had. So for instance, in a tweet earlier, he had said this, Representative Ilhan Omar in no mood to talk about her controversies this week. First she said, no thank you. When asked to comment on Trump saying she would resign, second time I saw her, she yelled, he used the word yelled, she yelled, are you serious? When I asked, or when I tried to question her. And then this video came up and totally went against how he described the situation.
Omar has apologized, but our own Manu Raju found her quite unwilling to discuss the controversy when he asked her about it today.
I'm asking you a question about your tweet. You had a tweet saying the president
Yes, I tweeted. There's a response. You can run that. Have a nice day.
It's kind of hard to argue that the politician was yelling at you when the very news outlet you work for had to use like subtitles for the audience to like hear, to read what she was saying. She was smiling. So look, I don't know if Manu Raju's description of what happened is accurate, but to be honest with you, I don't even care because I think the way Bernie Sanders handled it was right. Like we're talking about COVID-19, and look, I'm not trying to make this election, unimportant, but like, let's focus on what this press conference is about first, and then we'll get to, whether he's gonna drop out later.
I love Manu Raju's Twitter profile pic is him interviewing John McCain. That's like
the Maverick himself.
Yeah, it's like reporters love John McCain. Anyway, it shows like the absurdity of the obsession with like horse race coverage, with like trying to figure out the controversy of the latest like gossip and all that stuff when there's like a global crisis going on. It's just it sort of crystallizes it perfectly that the vast majority of the media is equipped to cover basically gossip. Like when are you dropping out? When are you dropping out? Like who cares? What's the?
That's a really good point. They treated Warren the same way.
Of course, that's the whole media.
Right.
Oh yeah. Well,
she doesn't owe anyone anything.
No, I mean that's the thing. Like all last night was the immediate conversation. Obviously, was when is Bernie dropping out? What does it mean to not drop out? And again, when there was not a clear path for Elizabeth Warren, no one in the news media even floated that question. She rolled into Super Tuesday knowing that it would not go well and was never asked when she would drop out, even leading up to that or really even after.
There was some of that in independent media, but
there was some of that in independent media. I'm just like, at what point is it like sexist to treat her with that much kid glove behavior? Like, no, seriously, like I'm never the one who's like, actually, I think it's fine to be chivalrous and whatever, but like, you're running for president, you're a grown woman, like let's treat your candidacy like you're a grown woman, like everyone who supports you, deserves also to understand whether you had a path or not. Now, I just wanna say with Bernie and not dropping out, I think a lot of Democrats think like, well, it'll be better if he does drop out for like our country as a whole. Not true, not true at all. We need, I think, as many leaders as possible, and I think Sanders, both being a senator and actually running for president, helps this effort on multiple levels to combat Republican ineptitude.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to have him, and I think it's important to have him still in the race.
Well, the thing that a lot of mainstream Democrats say is they make the argument that criticizing Joe Biden is only going to give ammo to the Republicans in November.
That's a great point.
As if they're like these blind people who need to have access to the secret Joe Biden files that Bernie has. Like the secret lines of criticism that they have not figured out already that are plain before anyone's eyes.
Well, I have news for them also. Republicans are far more vicious
than they'll go so much harder than Bernie.
Than any of the left-wing critics could ever even imagine being, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like, Bernie in 2016 was like, I'm not too comfortable with Hillary giving $100,000 speeches to Wall Street. And Republicans are like, she's a literal demon who came up from the ground and has horns.
Yeah, totally.
It's like,
she's running a child sex trafficking ring.
Pizzagate, like. Well,
Pizzagate, like she has a terminal illness. Like they go to places that
it's like it doesn't compare. It's like,
Well, and that's what's actually scary. Like if you do believe that Biden is the best candidate to beat Trump, then show it now. Show it by being able to withstand the criticism, respond to the criticism, own up to the mistakes if there were mistakes made in the past. And that shows that you actually can withstand the Republicans come November.
So Jake said something yesterday that was thought-provoking for me. I'm trying to process it and decide how I feel about it because I think that there might be a grain of truth to it, right? So the argument that he made, because I said during the members only post game show, and by the way, you should support the show, become a member, tyt.com/Joe.
Don't tell them what the argument was.
All the good spicy takes.
You're gonna reveal what the argument.
But I want to give you a sense of like the kind of things that we discuss. And so Cenk was Skyping in, and I said, Bernie should stay in the race, right? Even knowing that it's not looking good for him. I recognize that. I don't think like, oh, he's got a great chance of winning, but because I agree with you in that the message that he carries is an important message. And it inspires people, it activates people, and people dismiss that, but I think that's important. By the way, I didn't make that case as eloquently last night. I was like not in a good place, like a good headspace. But anyway, Cenk responded by saying, no, it's not good for progressives. And the argument that he was making was that the longer he stays in the race, right, the worse progressives are gonna look because he's gonna appear to be like further dividing the party, like, cause that's the way we know the establishment will play it, right? And let's say Biden loses to Trump, which isn't impossible. I think that there's a pretty decent likelihood that that's gonna happen, right? Then they'll blame Bernie for that.
The only thing I'll say is that no matter what Bernie does, they're gonna blame Bernie.
Agreed.
Like in 2016, he campaigned for Hillary Clinton. Like I don't know, like, and look at how they thanked him for it. You know, like they still kept on with this fiction that he did some sort of untold damage to Hillary that wouldn't have been done by the Republicans anyway. Like they're not gonna. They've shown what they're willing to do. They're willing to basically strong arm people in their quote unquote lane to drop out, even though like Pete Buttigieg did something that was completely unprecedented in which he came in first or second in Iowa and New Hampshire, and he dropped out before Super Tuesday. No one's ever done that in the history of American politics. They're willing to do that, and they're willing to hold a primary in the middle of a global pandemic.
Yeah.
Like they're willing to do things that are beyond the pale. Like, and so this idea that we can kowtow to potential criticisms from them and that it will somehow eliminate those criticisms is ridiculous. Like they will not give us anything. Like they're.
Yeah, I disagree that I agree with Nando and I do disagree with Cenk. I think no matter what, progressives are going to be blamed. And I actually do think it is important for Bernie to stay in the race because I do think it is important for his leadership and his voice to be there so that people are not as alienated going into the general.
That's a really good point.
And I think that, because if he drops out, suddenly it's like, well, why pay attention to politics? I feel like I was, not duped again, but like this election was, stolen, or there's no progressives in the race anymore, versus being able to get to the convention, making demands on the Biden campaign, which is what happened after 2016 and the convention with the Clinton campaign, and giving progressives like a real, if you do want to beat Trump, and I know Bernie has said he would support Biden, then say, this is how Biden's going to be the candidate, but here are our demands.
Right.
And because we're rolling into this convention with some support, we have more grounds to make those demands as they did in 2016. And Clinton actually did take on some of the proposals that the Bernie team.
Her rhetoric certainly moved further to the left. You're right on that. One thing that I did want to add to it though, I think that one other upside of Bernie staying in this race, and it really does have a lot to do with like messaging and using what's happening right now, and it's a tragedy what a lot of Americans are going, what people around the world are going through right now with this pandemic. It's a teachable moment, and I worry that without Bernie in the race, we're gonna forget, not we, but the media cycle, average Americans are gonna stop talking about the type of solutions that he's proposed and how they would be helpful in the middle of this crisis, right? If we had already implemented those policies, how much better off we would be as a country, how much better off workers would be, companies would be, and how we would feel a little less unstable. Like I feel so unstable right now.
So the other thing is that Bernie is a genuine movement candidate. And the problem with being a movement candidate is that you gotta keep the movement going. And that's the only source of power that the movement has, is if the movement kind of is activated and keeps going and keeps pressuring and keeps, like that was Obama's biggest quote unquote mistake in 2008, is that he built up this giant grassroots organization, Obama for America, and as soon as he became president, he shut it down. Bernie shouldn't do that. Like he should keep his ability to rally millions of people, to command the attention of millions of people, even if the media doesn't cover him. I mean, if Bernie does a Facebook Live or whatever, hundreds of thousands of people watch it.
Yeah,
like
we're
that
used to it.
That is political power. That is a source of power. If he drops out of the race, it makes it harder for him to do that.
And I will say it's not anti-democratic. I think a lot of, again, sort of like centrist Democrats are like, no, but we're gonna lose. It'll like ruin our chances. Not at all.
I think it's anti-democratic to pressure someone to drop out of the race.
That is exactly right. It is more democratic to say, no, we're gonna like actually come together with a lot of tension, with a lot of criticism, and actually forge a path forward in this big tent. Like that's more democratic than saying, no, you drop out, fall in line, end of story.
But I love your point about leadership. Like Bernie is a person who thinks differently from almost any other politician in American politics. And like what you're talking about, I feel very unstable right now. Like this is a crisis beyond anything that we can imagine right now. Like this is a literal world historic event, and to have his voice providing solutions, providing comfort, providing all manner of things. What's Joe Biden comes up and does a press conference on coronavirus. Like, does anyone like care about what this man has to say about it? Like, literally, does anyone care? Like, even people who voted for him,
people
like, no
are
one's
trying to care. They're
no
like,
one's gonna tune into that.
Maybe I'll be inspired.
No, I mean, and what's he gonna say that's not just some empty platitude, right? Like, Bernie's gonna propose concrete things. He's gonna actually try to forge a way forward and at least put that idea in people's heads that a new way forward is possible. So like, I think he's got to stay in. He's not going to get any kudos for dropping out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. So write in, let us know what you think. I'm really curious what our members think about that. And we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back though, we'll talk about Rand Paul. I disagree with him on a lot of things, but after this next story that we share with you, you can't deny that he seems to be a man of principle.
Oh, he totally is.
Yeah, so we'll go to that story and more when we return. Cenk Uygur is not here today, which means that I will be able to talk during the show.
We'll see.
Poor Cenk, under the bus.
My God, if Jesus came back, how much would the Republicans hate him? Now you have to give away all of your possessions to the poor. Steve King would be like, oh, Weezy.
Cenk is oddly, scarily competitive.
Oh, it's insane. I play basketball against him. It's just like, how are you good at this?
The liberal mom says, Mark Thompson, have you ever thought about doing one of those tapes that soothe people to sleep? Like Mark Thompson reads the phone book. I'd buy it.
If you'll buy it, I'll do it.
Emilio D'Amelio writes in, John, you are so thick. I love you. That's what he wrote.
Pork Chop Express writes in and says John Idarola needs a new jacket.
Whoa.
Those 24-inch pythons are about to burst out of his sleeve.
Gun, baby. You know, the two people here said that their moms were both in love with you over Beauty and the Beast.
That's an improvement. I usually get grandmothers.
The Hour of Fire is brought to you by Brooke, and Brooke.
Yes, Brooke's got it.
Okay.
Take it.
All
you
right.
guys know I really like compliments.
Charlie Turk.
No, wait a minute, don't you dare.
Chemical castration when we return from the break.
Right, so that's it. We will settle it.
I want to see this.
Did Anna comment on my tan yet? No, she hasn't. Scandal at TYT.
You're a good boss.
But Anna did say that I come in here today with a fresh mind. That's all I'm about. I'm about a fresh mind.
I can't with you right now. Okay?
She just can't. She can't, but nonetheless, we have to for another 3 hours. I'm back, baby. Let's rip into Republicans. See, don't miss the live show.
That's great.
Tell people, if you're a member, you get the whole live show whenever you want, because this stuff doesn't go into any of the clips.
You are the media revolution. You are much needed.
TYT. The place is like 95% TYT on.
You guys, the Young Turks, which is my favorite channel, we're getting that message out.
Cenk and the Young Turks do an extraordinarily good job.
No matter what mainstream media says, you have to listen to the Young Turks.
The people who support us on the internet, that's what gives us strength. That's what allows anyone who was in there who was undecided to think one side seems to be winning. They seem to have a bigger army. There might be a reason for that. So thank you guys.
People work hard for what they have, and if you want more, you gotta do it yourself.
Stock stories bring headlines to life in an instant, whether you work on Wall Street or in Wichita. Stock report cards and professional analyst buy and sell ratings help gut check your thought process. Buy stock, take profits, and manage risk. And the Idea Feed is your daily one-stop investment shop with videos that unpack today's money-moving headlines in under 3 minutes, because you need ideas, not lectures. And live in-app chat from when you want to talk to someone, but you don't actually want to talk.
So what'd you think?
With unlimited commission-free stock trades and great ideas from real traders. Visit dough.com/TYT.
Here at TYT, we strive to instill confidence in our voters by educating them with factual, reliable, and easy to understand political information. And that's why we've partnered with Politiscope. Politiscope is the easiest way to understand the policies that your elected officials vote for and against. They also have the same goal of changing the perception of politics and reshaping the way political information is sought out and consumed. Politiscope strips away all the unnecessary complexity of politics and empowers voters with raw, unbiased information about elected officials and the policies they support. You can download the Politiscope app on the App Store or on the Google Play Store.
Welcome back to TYT. A few member comments for you. Eclectic Miscellanea says, wow, Bernie Sanders getting salty with CNN. It's about time. He's obviously been watching TYT's coverage. I think he's been busy, but.
No, he watches the show every, that's what I tell myself.
Can you imagine?
That'd be amazing. He's like, you're like the Fox and Friends of Bernie.
It would make everything worth it. Like, you know, we all have those moments, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can't be the only one who's like, was it worth it? Like, why didn't I become a hedge fund manager?
And the Kasparian, I like when she does the news reads.
That would make my life.
Member comments, the member comments are my favorite part of the show, getting the people involved.
There are no millionaires or billionaires in that audience.
Yeah.
I love it. There might be, I don't know. Nick V says, salty Bernie forever. My way, Norway, or the highway.
Hell
says,
yeah.
Wow, that's good.
The names always, I love the names. Keep them coming with the names.
Except for that one about Jenks, like nipple piercings or whatever. Like that one, I don't, yeah, exactly.
Jenks has a nipple piercing?
No, he doesn't. Someone has a handle.
How do you know?
Actually, I don't know. Don't want to know.
You know, fan art is real.
He doesn't
So
seem
if there's
to
a
be
fan,
a
if there's a
type.
picture of it, then I believe it, then it's real, it happened.
The mathematician says, this is why we all love Bernie Sanders. If only he'd shown this level of vim and vinegar when fighting Joe Biden and the establishment, the primary might have ended differently. We clearly need to pass the candidate mantle on to someone younger and armed with a flamethrower. I'd get Ilhan Omar to do it. I don't think she can run for president because she was born in Somalia.
Yeah, I mean that's a very loosey-goosey, because Ted Cruz was born in Canada and he ran for president. But so it's natural born citizen, which is a very vague term.
It's not a movie.
I don't know.
Natural born killers?
Yeah. Killer, American killer, same thing sometimes.
By the way, Melissa wrote back to tell us what she was referring to. Excuse my memory, all I know is Nando is the one who said, what? Sorry, Anna Kasparian, I will try to reference what I'm talking about in my tweets.
No,
okay?
don't apologize.
You better be
Never
sorry.
apologize.
No.
Thank you for tweeting it.
Yeah, you don't need to apologize. You didn't do anything wrong. All right, well, let's move on to the rest of the news. So, as Senate Republicans were deciding whether they were going to pass the House version of economic relief to Americans in the middle of this coronavirus pandemic, Rand Paul was the one Republican senator who was holding out because he wanted some concessions, not just from Democrats, but from Republicans as well. So Senate leaders were scrambling Tuesday to pass coronavirus legislation as quickly as possible, but Senator Rand Paul put a damper on those plans. So this is the second coronavirus aid bill that they're talking about and debating, right? So the sources said Paul was forcing a vote on his amendment, which would require a social security number for purposes of the child tax credit and to provide the president the authority to transfer funds as necessary and to terminate United States military operations and reconstruction activities in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So he's notorious in his opposition to these interventionist wars, regime change change wars. It's one of the things that he's really well known for. And so it's interesting that he used this moment of crisis to tap into that and try to get some concessions from lawmakers. Now, Chuck Schumer was not pleased by it. And so he said, in a time of national emergency, this Republican amendment is ridiculous, a colossal waste of time. We probably could have voted on this bill a day or two ago if not for the need to schedule this amendment. And by the way, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was also displeased. He said, my counsel to them is to gag and vote for it. Sounds dirty.
My counsel to gag and vote for it.
Yeah, that's how I eat.
Gag on it. My name's Mr. McConnell. Love to gag on the Senate bill.
So let me just note that the bill did pass today.
Yeah.
The bill did pass today. So it expands unemployment assistance. It includes nutrition assistance. It increases resources for testing so people can get coronavirus testing for free. It also includes paid family leave up to 12 weeks, but it will now be offered to parents caring for children who are home from school because of the school closures. Small businesses with less than 50 employees, including healthcare firms, will now also be required to pay for sick leave or family leave at the discretion of the Labor Department. 2 weeks of paid sick leave capped at $511 per day will still be provided to some workers at companies with less than 500 employees. So that loophole that we talked about, that concession that Nancy Pelosi provided to Republicans, that still stands. But lawmakers are still working on another version. Like they just passed this for now. They're working on an improved version moving forward. We'll see how that looks.
Yeah, I mean, if I understood his amendment correctly, I think the Social Security number put in there was like
for immigrants.
That was basically targeting the undocumented population in this country. So it was basically just a turd with like, some frosting on top. Because like the frosting is, yeah, get out of Afghanistan. What are we doing still there? And then the turd being, racism.
Yeah, I mean, it's so clear that he doesn't want to offer. Look, undocumented immigrants are people too, right? So you might disagree with how our immigration system works, but you're a lawmaker. You guys should have passed comprehensive immigration reform, and then after that, shut the F up.
Exactly.
Not just that, but they also can contract and pass on coronavirus.
COVID doesn't discriminate.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's such a good point.
And they work a huge amount in the what's called like the sort of unofficial economy, right?
And in Trump properties and stuff like that.
Yeah, that too. And but like domestic workers often are undocumented. Like they can't go to work.
Yeah, this is the type of public health issue that impacts everyone, and you can't like exempt certain groups of people because of your political agenda. Because you guys are absolutely right. We want to stop the spread of COVID-19, and creating a situation that Rand Paul would want, right, does nothing to help halt the spread.
I mean, I was just gonna say, I do think it is like, it's heartening to me as much as I hate Mitch McConnell and I dislike Chuck Schumer, but it is nice to see like Congress doing something, like some kind of agreement. Like this is the moment where you need to be able to prove that as lawmakers, you can actually get stuff done.
Well, look, if I were a lawmaker and I wanted to play the same games that have been played in Congress for years now, for decades now, I'd be concerned about pitchforks, and I think that might be part of it.
Well,
really?
Yeah, I mean, if people can't like buy bread in 2 weeks, which like there's gonna be millions of Americans. Like if there's no relief that doesn't come immediately, like people are gonna be like, I can't eat. I like literally cannot eat. Like, no one has any savings. No one.
No. And by the way, I just want to note, if you look at case study after case study, when do countries, municipalities experience an uptick in violence? It's when people are economically desperate, right? Financially desperate. And if they didn't act quickly, this situation would be even worse, and it would devolve at a rapid pace. So I think that's part of the reason why that they were willing to act in this bipartisan way. And I hope that they offer more relief moving forward, because I don't agree with that loophole when it comes to paid time off.
It's woefully inadequate.
I agree.
Like it's woefully inadequate.
So the second half of this, though, is the Afghanistan part of the story. And so like I'm of two minds on that, right? Because on one hand, is this really the time to hold up incredibly important legislation to make a point about wars? And by the way, I agree with him when it comes to Afghanistan. I agree with some of his foreign policy. At the same time, though, when we're dealing with Congress that's full of like all these feckless, craven, spineless politicians who have no principles or morals, it is kind of nice to see someone who has, the cojones, I guess, to stick to his principles even when he knows that it's going to be a super unpopular thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, he is a legitimate libertarian ideologue. I mean, which libertarianism is goofy and dumb, but he sticks to it and he's consistent with it. He's not like one of these people say like call themselves libertarian and then are just basically Republicans. But he is like a genuine libertarian ideologue.
I thought I feel like it's Christmas if you're a libertarian now. You're like, yeah, we could just like everyone run amok and everyone on their own, and there is no plan for the pandemic. Woo! Like, like I've been meaning to build this moat around my house for months, and now I have time to do it to keep out all the illegals or whatever. Like, I don't know how libertarians talk, but the point is like, I don't know why he's not celebrating, because the entire point of being government but also libertarian is ridiculous. I will say this about Afghanistan. There are straight up hospitals that the US has built that are empty in Afghanistan.
Wow.
Like, what if we had invested those hospitals and that construction in the US?
I mean, well, it's just...
We were spreading democracy, Francesca, come on.
This is just another reminder that we're still in Afghanistan,
I
which
know.
I forget about, and then like some like little news alert will come up like, oh, we're still in Afghanistan 20 years later. And I mean, the US did a nice little airstrike in Iraq last week in the middle of this pandemic too. They were like, oh, we're gonna do a little airstrike. Like we're just gonna keep doing, the empire rolls on, baby. Like the coronavirus is gonna bring us all to our knees, but the cruise missiles, they gotta keep going.
Well, we have some more international news for you guys. Unfortunately, it's not cheery news at all. It's pretty devastating. I wanna give you an update on what's happening with Iran right after this break.
Many of you already know that the TYT Army has been officially organizing for the past year, and the Army is constantly growing, too strong. They're making decisions on which candidates and elected officials to help, and always coming up with ways to inform people about progressive policies. Now, we want to give a huge shout out to some special volunteers and highlight accomplishments of our TYT Army. You're making all the difference. In Detroit, Michigan, Captain Sterling Sherman organized a team to attend the 15th annual UMACON event to gather more signatures for the Progressive Economic Pledge, which you can also sign, by the way, at tyt.com/pledge. Here's what he had to say. The NMA community is a vital influence in the fight for net neutrality, higher wages, and benefits like healthcare. Many people signed the Progressive Economic Pledge on my phone, and one guy knew who we are and wanted to volunteer. Love it again. I also went to a panel called #BlackGirlsAreTheGame, where they talked about the lack of good representation of black women in video games in the industry. The ladies on the panel are in charge of the Instagram communities, and we're also delighted to sign the pledge. Win. Thank you, Sterling and the entire team who helped make this happen. You are TYT. To learn more about the TYT Army and how you can help from home or even start your own team, head to tyt.com/army. And PS, check your spam folder for lost emails to stay up to date with our events.
Did I think I would like to see a dictator? But if there's going to be one, I want it to be Trump.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Where's the line? We've crossed every line you can imagine.
We are a socialist country. It's socialism for the rich.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
You don't have to know the truth, just believe what they tell you.
There is no bounds to their monstrous hypocrisy. TikTok. I think we're gonna win the Senate in 2020. And I think we're gonna have the House, and I think we're gonna have the presidency. TikTok. And in 2020, we're going to clean your clock, and we're gonna run you out of town, and we're gonna have an actual democracy in this country. November of 2020 could also be potentially the greatest day of our lives. Let us whisper of a dream.
With Doe, you can turn your passions into potential investment opportunities. Whether it's cannabis, fashion, travel, video games, or anything in between, you tell them what you're interested in, and they'll help you uncover the investment potential. Doe provides your daily one-stop investment shop with lists of companies that relate to your personal interests, relevant news, and your favorite stocks and videos that unpack today's money-moving headlines in under 3 minutes. Go to doe.com/TYT.
Today, a terrible day for the internet, a terrible day for America. The internet as we know it is not going to exist anymore.
A real dark day for information, and yet another way that they're bleeding out the democracy.
We're now going to have these gatekeepers of information deciding what we can and can't see, and that's what scares me the most.
Whether you're conservative or progressive or anywhere in the middle, this is the one thing we should all agree to. Protect the internet, because the establishment is coming for it. Don't let them destroy the internet.
Welcome back to TYT. I have to read these super chat comments because one of them, Nando.
What?
You're such a down-to-earth guy, and it's kind of shocking because like the Washington Post called you hunky, right? And then this comment from Ethan, okay?
Wow,
Ethan
okay.
says, watching TYT and Nando is quite the snack.
Wow.
Mr. 305.
It's a Cheez-It.
He is a Cheez-It.
They're
That
not
was
sponsors.
a Cheez-It comment right there.
So there's that. Though that may just be the social isolation speaking. That's how my quarantine is going, LOL. Howard D. No, a lot of people think that he's hunky. Howard D says, my job at SJ Airport told us to work, then cut hours, then close down half of our stores and sent us home anyway, then told us to file unemployment.
Yay.
Yeah, a lot of people are getting that treatment. Same thing happened with Christian. So, yeah, because he's a bartender. There's no work if you're a bartender right now. Kevin writes in and says, I sent a super chat yesterday regarding Trump refusing to use World Health Organization COVID-19 tests so he could profit by giving a government contract to Thermo Fisher, which he holds significant stock in. That's interesting. I want to look into that. Thank you for your comment, and I love like tips like that. But that would make sense. I mean, Trump has only thought about how he could use the office of the presidency to enrich himself, so it's not far-fetched at all. All right, with that said, quick update on tyt.com/go. I want to take a quick look at the thermometer. This is our fundraising effort to keep TYT sustainable for the next year. All right, we're making some progress.
Making some progress.
We're trying to raise, oh my God, we're trying to raise 2 million? I thought we were trying to raise 1 million. Oh my God.
Like that scene in Social Network.
We are not
really
doing
cool.
well like that. We're okay, cool. Yay.
10th of the way, more or
You
less.
have to go on Twitch,
Okay,
girl.
we have a year. We have a year.
You need to twitch it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some uncensored content.
I mean, yeah. I don't.
I mean, no joke. Everyone is turning to the cam these days.
Yeah.
There are people who will pay a decent amount of money just to see feet.
Oh yeah,
like that's a thing.
Yeah.
And
or even just like mail them
I'm not
your
above
shoes.
that. Like
People
I'll
do
show
that.
you my feet. No, I won't. Unless you pitch in.
I'll show
in the
you my
TYT.
corns. Yeah, you want to see corns? I got them.
All right.
I've had them since I was 9 because I wore really tight shoes. They're uncomfortable. Yeah, I got
Like
them
in the
corns. You guys want corns? My Venmo is Franny Fio.
All right, let's move on because we gotta cover what's happening in Iran, and this is not a fun story at all. But it's important for you to understand that sanctions terrorize people, innocent people, and certainly in the middle of a pandemic. So, Iran has been hit with the spread of coronavirus, and unfortunately, they've been hit the hardest. The death rate in Iran is among the highest of every other country, with the exception of 2 others, actually. So the official death toll, and this is devastating in Iran, from the coronavirus disease has risen to 1,135 after 147 new deaths were reported in the past 24 hours. Another 1,192 cases have also been confirmed, bringing the total, this is the total in Iran so far, 17,361, the 3rd highest in the world, okay? So the situation in Iran is dire, and what's made it worse is the economic sanctions that the Trump administration has implemented. Now, I wanna just go back for a second, because I think it's important for people to really understand the context and how these sanctions were implemented. Iran negotiated the Iran nuclear deal with the Obama administration, and that halted the production of enriched uranium, okay, in the country. They were following through. It wasn't just between the United States and Iran. There were other European countries involved to ensure that Iran was following through and that they were not developing nuclear weapons. That's what the whole point of this negotiation was. And in return, the Obama administration had lifted sanctions against Iran. Trump comes in, and of course, he's this egomaniac, this crazy person who decided to rip up that deal and implement those sanctions anyway, even though other countries that were involved told him, don't do that, that's a bad idea. Even though Iran was following through with their part of this deal. And so it makes this story so much worse when you think about the hateful, like jealous, envious incompetence from Donald Trump. So with that said, let me give you more numbers on what's happening in Iran. Researchers estimate, researchers estimate Iran will not reach the peak of the epidemic until late May, and they estimate as many as 3.5 million people could die as a result. So any humanitarian effort to help save the people of Iran is not allowed, because the United States has bullied every other country into avoiding any type of trade, any type of work with Iran. They're totally isolated. Right. It's disgusting.
Yeah, and the Iran sanctions are particularly infuriating because every single Democrat in Congress voted for them except for Bernie Sanders.
Right.
Because they were tied to the Russian sanctions, undoing their hero Barack Obama's biggest accomplishment, foreign policy accomplishment by far. Just undoing it overnight because of the whole Russia thing. And these sanctions, like it's worth repeating, sanctions kill people. This is an extreme case that it could result in the deaths of millions, but sanctions on Iraq in the 1990s killed hundreds of thousands of people. Sanctions all over, like Venezuela and Cuba, like they impoverish the population and kill people. They never, ever, ever harm the regime. Like that's just like the stated goal, by their stated goals, they never work. They just work to impose pain and misery on the populations of those countries, often innocent people, children, all that stuff.
Right, and if you think that a government is authoritarian anyway, why would you pass sanctions against it? Because you know the way they're going to respond is just in an authoritarian way, and their people are going to bear the brunt of it. It's just like it's counterintuitive.
Trump doesn't care about the authoritarian nature. If Trump could be a full-blown authoritarian in this country, he would do it. And more importantly, look at all of the cozy relationships we have with authoritarians around the world. Look at how much, Trump loves Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely, and this was why I think what Nando just mentioned was something that the moderators on the CNN debate between Biden and Bernie weren't able to mention, which is that Bernie explicitly voted against those sanctions on Russia because they included extra sanctions on Iran, and
it was the only sanctions, the ones that undid the deal.
Right, exactly, and it's like, yeah, this was the crown jewel in Obama's second term, right? And honestly, I thought it was great. I mean, and I think the alleviating of tensions or with Cuba was also another one.
Russia. I mean, that was the Obama administration's signature policy, was to lower tensions with Russia, which Mitt Romney made fun of him in the debate in 2012. Like, it's like the world is gone
topsy-turvy, for sure,
down.
Definitely.
And now we have Biden, who was the vice president the entire time, not being called out on it. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like hearing Biden repeat these right-wing talking points. It's like you feel like you're taking crazy pills, and not getting called out on it. So I guess I just want to say also, like, my heart goes out to the people of Iran, and I can't imagine how it must feel to know that your country is in an even worse state. Like we've been complaining about the US's poor response, but
and by the way, you're like, people in power in Iran have not responded sufficiently to coronavirus either. So it's not, we're not trying to make it seem as though like leadership in Iran is great. No, leadership in Iran is devastating, it's disastrous, but it's not about leadership in Iran. It's about the citizens of Iran, the people in Iran who are suffering as a result of the short-sightedness and the ridiculous nature of the Trump administration. And look, we shared with you satellite imagery of some of the mass graves that are now being dug in order to, basically bury these bodies. And so there it is. That image is just, it's terrifying. It's disastrous. And as an American, you should feel shame in knowing that that is what has come out of our government. That is that is a part of our responsibility. And if you genuinely care about life, right? All those right-wingers who care about life, what about the 3.5 million lives that are likely to perish in Iran because of our action, partly because of our actions? And I just can't get past it. And by the way, they're looking for some financial support from the IMF. I have issues with the IMF, but when you're desperate, I mean, what else are you gonna do? So according to the Denver Post, although Iran has one of the Mideast's best medical services, its hospitals appear to be overwhelmed, and authorities have asked for 172 million masks from abroad. It also has asked the International Monetary Fund for $5 billion, the first such loan for Iran since 1962. I don't know if they're gonna get the loan that they need, but I do know that humanitarian efforts to Iran are blocked because of these US sanctions.
Right, and what the interest on that loan is going to be if the IMF does grant the country of Iran a loan like that. I mean, we've seen what they've done in the past. I guess I just wanna say, I think this is, as scary of a crisis it is internationally, it is such a moment for international solidarity and opportunity. Maybe it's like, a lot of the hippie in me and maybe some of the Bernie Sanders in me that's like, what if, if the US develops a vaccine or a cure or another country, right? Like that we give it to Iran first and foremost.
Yeah, for everyone.
For everyone, but it's like, you think that would go just a little bit far in like alleviating tensions with Iran, like when I mean, that's the thing is that Anna's exactly right that we lump, and our government tells us to lump leaders in with their citizenry. And the opposite is true. We are in solidarity with those people, and if we actually reached out and had like person-to-person solidarity, you get the vaccine first because you need it first, what would that do? How would the people of Iran turn on their government? I mean, and I don't mean to like overthrow it. I just mean like, in a sense of solidarity.
It's one thing to try to influence culture, right? And empower the citizens of a country to take matters into their own hands, to empower them. We have no business, in my opinion, going into countries and determining whether a leader is fit or a regime is fit to lead. But if we do see issues, I think that lending a helping hand and humanitarian efforts go way further in terms of accomplishing the supposed goals our government claims they want to accomplish, as opposed to what we've been doing, which is killing innocent civilians around the world for decades. That's what we do. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, we'll have a little bit of fun with one of my favorite segments, As the White House Turns. And then later on in the show, what are we gonna talk about? Fox is blaming millennials for not taking the coronavirus seriously, which I think is hilarious. So we'll talk about that and more.
Are you a politician with a ridiculous point to make? Are you in need of a petulant, outdated way to make it? Then you'll need one of my signs. Hi, I'm Simon Simonson of Simonson Signs. We'll take the stupid, over-the-top, meaningless allegory you have and put it on foam core. So maybe someone will notice your grandstanding, because this is C-SPAN, and anything that's not people milling around in front of a running vote count is almost considered moderately entertaining. The bar is low, just like our prices. We've got plenty of designs. We also brought you Mike Lee's Tauntauns. They're tons of fun. What does this have to do with the Green New Deal? About as much as this other visual aid he used of Reagan on a T-Rex. Or is that a velociraptor? Who cares? Who the cares? No one gives a. Call us now at Simon Simonson Signs. We'll make your stupid point stupidly for money today.
Viewers had asked for an interview with the TYT Lizard. Mr. Lizard. Oh, you changed colors today. Nice. I don't even know how you feel about us. Do you even like us?
Well, you guys made me this awesome house, so I'm kind of in your debt. I was found outside on the street, and you gave me a home. Granted, it was a really crappy home for a while, but then through the power of fundraising, I became a person who has a multi-level Trump-style mansion.
You do. By the way, you've never looked better, man. Normally, you're just green or just brown, but today you're in mid-lizard, right?
I'm not very smart. I'm a lizard, so I don't know how the science works. I guess this is just my mood. It's not every day that thresholds like this are broken. I'm just so excited. I can't contain my pigmentation.
And now you're showing it off.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen the lizard like this before.
When you choose Aspiration, you can also trust that your hard-earned money is deposited into a financial firm with a conscience. You're sending a message for change and saving yourself more than just a couple bucks along the way. With the Aspiration Spend and Save account, you'll actually pay no monthly fees. Aspiration also commits to donating 10% of every dollar of its earnings to charitable microloans for low-income Americans. And as a thank you, when you sign up with Aspiration, we'll give you a free month of TYT membership. Head to aspiration.com/TYT.
That 300 million is a pretty good number, we were doing a press release on it and I got all worked up and I said, okay, well, that's the size of the US population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world on the road to 6 billion. Although by the time we hit it, it'll probably be 7, maybe 8 billion.
Not a big deal. A couple of days ago on the TYT network, we passed 1 billion views.
What the hell?
What the hell?
That's a big freaking deal.
2 billion views.
What now?
Sorry.
What did we do? 2 billion?
2 billion.
They said it couldn't be done, but it was done.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts? Young Turks crosses 6 billion views. Young Turks has just passed another milestone, 10 billion views.
Damn. When you sign up for NordVPN, you'll take control of your internet experience while helping support us here at TYT. NordVPN allows up to 6 connections at once and no data limits, so you can get all the content you want on any device. For a limited time, go to nordvpn.com/TYT or use the coupon TYT to get a 3-year plan for 70% off plus 1 extra month free.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna, Nando, and Francesca with you. So in lieu of reading a bunch of comments, I think it's important to hear from one of our viewers who's sharing her experience with Iran. She has family in Iran. So Deb writes in, she wrote to me specifically and she said it's okay to share this message. She said the following: I'm watching your show today and I'm so appreciative that you did a segment on the humanitarian crisis happening in Iran. I was able to come back last month before things got bad, but my whole family is still there. They've been inside for 21 days and things are getting really dire. The fact that Trump is not only refusing to relieve some economic sanctions on Iran, which is unprecedented. Bush did in 2003 after the earthquake.
Yeah.
But they're adding even more on top of them. It's so cruel, and Western media, other than you, is ignoring it. In fact, by the way, you're right. I don't see a lot of coverage in Western media. And the article that really inspired me to talk about that story today was by Deutsche Welle, which is a German outlet. And by the way, Nando's the one who sent me that link. So please thank Nando for that.
He's
but anyway,
hunky.
I'm trying so hard to get more outlets to focus on this. I already know one person who has died from the virus, and I'm afraid for my family and friends. Thank you for everything you do. So Deb, stay strong. We'll stay on the story as much as we can, but it's devastating what's happening to the people of Iran right now.
It's a good point, because I mean, the Bush administration is evil in every way, but it is true that in 2003 there was a massive earthquake in southern Iran, and the Bush administration temporarily lifted the sanctions in Iran to get massive amounts of aid to help victims of the earthquake. Like, the fact that we're not doing this now for coronavirus is, it's psychotic is the only way to describe it. I mean, we're just inflicting death for no reason.
Yeah, and I didn't understand. I read the article and it made it clear that the way that sanctions interfere with humanitarian aid is that it all gets caught up in the banks, essentially. If you're trying to like wire any money or send supplies, like it's just completely delayed and or blocked. And so that's the specifics, I guess.
It just sucks that, innocent people suffer from, the brutality of Trump and bad actors in Iran. But anyway, all right, we got to move on. We try to get into a lighter headspace because this story is actually a little fun. So Donald Trump just realized that his son-in-law is a moron, and he's upset about it because Jared Kushner was put in charge to deal with coronavirus initially, and he has failed miserably. So there's drama in the White House, which calls for yet another segment of As the White House Turns.
Made some very big mistakes. I asked for his resignation. I'm disappointed in the Attorney General.
So Gabriel Sherman over at Vanity Fair is reporting that a rift between Donald Trump and his son-in-law because his son-in-law is an incompetent fool. I mean, so is Donald Trump, but they bungled the initial response to COVID-19, the coronavirus, and that has led to some serious consequences. So Sherman writes, as Trump processes the stakes facing the country and his presidency, he's also lashing out at advisors whom he blames for the White House's inept and flat-footed response. Sources say a principal target of his anger is Jared Kushner. So sources told me, Sherman writes, Trump is regretting that Kushner swooped into the coronavirus response last week. Kushner, according to sources, encouraged Trump to treat the emergency as a PR problem when the White House's chief coronavirus advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci, and others were calling for aggressive action. So a former White House official told Vanity Fair, quote, I have never heard so many people inside the White House openly discuss how pissed Trump is at Jared. In fact, one source briefed on the internal conversations told Vanity Fair that Kushner advised Trump not to call a national emergency during his Oval Office address on March 11th because, quote, it would tank the markets. The markets cratered anyway. All right.
That's obvious that that's what was going on behind the scenes. That somebody was telling him that this is only a PR story. I mean, and that was the directive sent to all Fox News, like the executives and all of the hosts, because that's how they were treating it. But yeah, who knew that the silver spoon 80s villain, weird Pinocchio wax figure who fixed the Middle East by building settlements. Like, I'm surprised he wasn't just like, we need to build settlements in Italy.
No, I mean,
healthy settlements.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But at the same time, I don't know, maybe I didn't think about it long enough. I didn't really care to, because Trump himself is so concerned about his own objectives, his own political agenda, his own image, that he didn't even really need Jared Kushner to say, you treat this as a PR issue. Trump would have done that on his own, which is why it was so easy. If this story is 100% true and he took Jared Kushner's lead, it would be easy for him to just fall for that advice, because that's where his head would be at anyway, right? By the way, Jared, according to one White House official, told Trump that Google was doing an entire website that would be up in 72 hours and had 1,100 people working on it 24/7. That's just a lie. So that was the whole Google debacle, right? That Trump had announced, and then it turned out it wasn't true. Google had to respond to it and say like, no, we're not doing that.
It was supposed to track cases?
I don't remember exactly what Google's
really say
website was supposed to do.
What it was gonna be.
Yeah.
But yeah, now that's a new kind of thing that they're talking about letting Silicon Valley use their surveillance capabilities on us to track coronavirus cases, which, fair enough. But it's one of those things that obviously should be done by the federal government and not a private company, because who knows what they're going to then use all that information for. But
don't want a private company doing that. I'm just keeping it real.
The government could hire Google to build it for them.
Right.
I don't understand why it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, they give out government contracts all the time.
All the time.
So why don't we just go in that direction? Why do you need to privatizing every part of the response isn't the right way to go about it either, right? Or at all. By the way, so what really clicked for Trump, right? Why is it that all of a sudden he's like, oh wow, this moron that my daughter's been married to for a while and has kids with isn't the right person to lead this effort? Well, it was when the coronavirus actually impacted Trump himself. Now, it's not that he contracted the virus, but more importantly,
that we know.
It affected
we
his
would
business.
never know. We know we would never know, right?
Okay. Right, yeah, we would never know. You're
Just
right.
As long as we know that if Trump really did have COVID-19, none of us would ever find out about it.
Right, but what we do know is that there was an issue with coronavirus at Mar-a-Lago. So this is his resort that he likes to go to all the time. One reason the president's attitude may be changing, not maybe, is definitely changing, is that coronavirus showed up at his doorstep, literally. Mar-a-Lago is now a hot spot. Last week, Trump interacted with a Brazilian government official who tested positive for COVID-19. The appearance of coronavirus inside the president's bubble jolted the president's inner circle that up until that point treated the virus more like a Democratic plot. So this is so this is expected of conservatives, right? They don't care about things and they don't take things seriously until it impacts them.
Absolutely.
It's like, we're against gay rights. And then all of a sudden they have a daughter or son who comes out and they're like, you know what? We should really allow gay people to get married. This is wrong what we're doing.
I've evolved on the issue.
Yeah, I've evolved, exactly.
Speaking of which, I just got a New York Times alert that Rep. Mario Diaz-Balart from Miami is the first member of Congress to test positive for coronavirus. And the mayor of Miami also has it. I don't know whether Diaz-Balart was in Mar-a-Lago or met with that Brazilian entourage of Jair Bolsonaro that looked like he gave it to the mayor of Miami. But yeah, it's coming for all those people.
And Florida did go ahead with their election yesterday.
They did.
Cool.
Smart decision, DNC, smart decision. All right, well, let's move on to some other hypocrisy in the news today. Fox and Friends has, let me start that again. All right, there we go. Fox and Friends has decided to blame a specific demographic for not taking COVID-19 seriously enough, which is hilarious because, as we all know, Fox has been notorious in how they didn't take it seriously and then all of a sudden switched their messaging when Trump started taking it seriously. Now, what happened recently? Well, they had Dr. Nicole Safier on to discuss COVID-19, and here's her expert commentary.
Well, the truth is, I see a lot of people just dismissing this, saying that this is no worse than the flu, and I'm going to continue to live my life, especially these millennials and these younger generations. But the truth is that this may be the same as the flu. Mm-hmm. We will not know that until next year. Right now, this is more severe than the flu. We have a higher death rate, and the biggest issue that I'm concerned with is the overrunning of our hospital systems. I don't want to see our hospital systems collapse because of this.
So this was on Fox and Friends, which is just so funny because you see the panel of idiots taking it real seriously, these millennials bad, they should really take it. By the way, some millennials haven't been taking it seriously. We did a story yesterday about spring break at Clearwater, Florida, and all these young people are having a great time. And it's not just about young people and young people are less likely to lose their lives as a result of COVID-19. It's not impossible, but it's less likely. But you don't want them spreading it to people who are much more vulnerable to the virus, right? But here's the thing, like Fox has been insanely irresponsible in the way they've reported this story. They changed their tone and the seriousness of their reporting on it recently when Trump did. They used Trump's messaging as like, you know, the sign of how they should cover the news, which is ridiculous. And so I'm gonna go to a fun video that the Washington Post put together. It shows like this before and after juxtaposition that's pretty stark, but I wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Well, I mean, we have data. There's been polling done on, you know, how worried people are about the coronavirus pandemic, and it shows that Fox News viewers are the lowest likely to be concerned about the coronavirus pandemic, and it's because of what they're being fed all day. It's like we have the numbers. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, this whole blaming millennials thing is like a cottage industry that not only plagues Fox News, which loves to cater to its insanely old demographic, but it happens also in the New York Times, and it's like a fun thing the media does. You know, like there's like an ongoing joke of like millennials killed blank, you know, and it's like
napkins. Yeah. We killed TGI Fridays.
Oh,
we killed diamonds.
Oh, my bad.
Wait, okay, the napkin thing. Just real quick tangent. I was like, what does that mean? We killed. I use napkins, but no, they were referring to like cloth napkins, which seem like a weird thing to spend money on.
That also not true. Like,
right?
The cloth napkin, I mean, the paper napkin was invented, that was like a 50s, 60s type thing, right? I have cloth napkins. Oh my goodness. I don't iron them. They're very wrinkly.
You have cloth napkins?
Of course I have cloth napkins.
I just use my t-shirt. When I'm at home, I just go.
No, cloth napkins, no paper napkins. I don't even have paper towels in my house. I just have all the toilet paper.
I'm sure that's better for the environment. And now I feel like a bad lefty, right? Pretty bad lefty. That's an actual handle on Twitter. I've heard it a bunch of times. Anyway, but yeah, you're probably right.
We killed a lot of things. This is, looking at Fox and the way they're changing their tune is just proof, obviously, that the human centipede relationship between Trump and Fox News executives is like, well, I mean, it's more of a can I say 69? It's more of a human. Anyway, there's very direct bodily fluids being passed from mouth to.
That's why they're all getting coronavirus.
It's just gotten even worse with COVID-19. Now they're just coughing it into each other's butts.
Well, look, I want to show you the before and after video.
Whatever gets your rocks off.
But yeah, it's I mean, and that's really scary because I think they're clearly like, I think it's more direct than like I'm taking like the White House statement. I think it's like Jared Kushner on the phone saying, this is how we're playing this. This is how you need to play this.
No, that's exactly what's happening. Yeah. There was a story, I'm the one who actually nixed it from our rundown. Well, it was pitched. I never even made it to the rundown. But it was about,
withholding information.
Hey, everybody calm down.
Some producer in the back is like, I knew it was a good story.
The reason why I didn't put it in the rundown is because it's gonna take up space and there were other stories I'd rather talk about. And it's like a given, yes. There are White House officials who hit up like crazy right-wingers in the media and they give them the messaging.
Oh, yeah.
By the way, it doesn't have to be in extreme situations where you're dealing with like the Alex Joneses of the world, right? But I think Democrats should do the same, right?
Well, the Hillary Clinton campaign did it. There was that story that came out during the primary in 2016 that a bunch of prominent liberal journalists were doing like private messaging meetings with the Hillary campaign.
I mean,
it happens.
But is that like a crazy, nefarious thing?
No,
like,
I mean,
I think it's totally unethical. I mean, I don't think
if you're a journalist and you're taking the lead from like, so for instance, I love Bernie Sanders, right? But if Bernie Sanders was like, oh, let's meet in a smoke-filled room and I'm gonna tell you what you're gonna say on your show, I'd be like, oh, you're a fraud and I don't like you and I'm done with you, right?
It's vape smoke though, to be fair though.
Okay, vape smoke, then we're having a conversation. Okay, so let's go to this video that the Washington Post put together. It shows you what Fox News hosts said before Trump started taking coronavirus seriously and what they said after.
At worst case scenario, it could be the flu.
I feel like the more I learn about this, the less there is to worry about.
I was about to say the same thing. We don't have immunity to this virus. It's a new virus. It's a pandemic strain of a virus we haven't seen before.
All the talk about coronavirus being so much more deadly doesn't reflect reality. Without a vaccine, the flu would be far more deadly. We are facing an incredibly contagious and dangerous virus that is moving across the world from one hotspot to another.
We're going to call out anyone and everyone who's using this virus as a political weapon against the president. The standard flu every single year kills tens of thousands of Americans. We are now entering what will be the crucial defining 15-day period as it relates to this virus, where we must slow the spread of coronavirus.
It's actually the safest time to fly. Everyone I know that's flying right now, terminals are pretty much dead. We have a responsibility to slow down this virus and to think of other people during this time. And so if you can keep your distance and prevent someone from getting close to you that might be sick, you could save your family, you can save the elderly, and help our country as a nation.
It is absolutely disgusting that Democrats are seeking to use this complex virus to score cheap political points. This dangerous health crisis could dovetail quickly into a political crisis, already feeling economic ramifications of it all.
It's just so incredible.
Perfectly, or wait.
It's just within days. It's like, this is nothing more than a hoax. And then like a day later, we need to take this seriously, everyone. We got to stop the spread of. By the way, let's only listen to the revised version of their commentary.
Yes. I also think that I'm glad the Washington Post put that out. I do think every news outlet should pick that up because that was brilliant.
Definitely.
And I think in the same way that Democrats don't, take the upper hand when it's literally given to them on a platter, I think that news outlets should prove their worth and say, we're actually giving you real news. Let's check in with the, the most watched network in America, and they should run that. I think that's brilliant.
We got to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about a major downfall of a privatized system when it comes to a crisis like coronavirus. There's a lot of price gouging going on.
Shocker.
A lot of gross behavior happening, and it needs to be called out. So that's what we're gonna do. We'll be right back.
I'll predict right here for you, Chris. I think Donald Trump will leave office before his term is up. He'll be humiliated, embarrassed, and I know him. He's not going to want to lose, and he's going to run for the hills.
You got that bet all day long.
Okay, let's get after it. Now, so look, Jake has made some good predictions, and this is in good fun. I could not disagree more.
There's a little bromance between the two of them. You got that bet all day long, Janky, you. Oh, you stop. In the meantime, let's call him out on the damage.
But
I just got a Roku set. Did basically a little bit of channel surfing, and I was like, there we are.
Yeah.
There we are. And then I turned it on, and it was John and Brett on Damage Report making fun of me.
Oh no.
So you are so busted. I even took a picture of it, okay? And they're talking about my predictions. I got a new prediction for you, John Idarola.
You're doing a show that's blowing the doors off everybody.
Young Turks is the largest online news network, not a big deal. We're gonna rock the boat. We're gonna be counter-establishment. We're gonna tell people the truth to the best of our abilities. We're so sick of this corruption. We're not the robots on TV. I actually care about the news. Guilty, I care. Fourth day on Occupy Wall Street. Last night we launched Wolfpack. It's us pushing our ideas out there, trying to help the country in every way that we can, trying to make this place just a little bit better. Reporting from the Hillary-Bernie debate. I gotta be honest, you know what we do, we cover it for real. For us, this system isn't working. Free and fair elections.
And when he told the cops that day when they came to drag her away, and he said, if you're gonna chain her, you're gonna chain me. If you're gonna arrest her, you're gonna arrest me.
On the last weekend before the 2020 New Hampshire Democratic primary, volunteers organized a massive carpool to knock on doors for the most progressive presidential candidate of our lifetime, Bernie Sanders. TYT Army volunteers Jay Veray and Joseph Kirschenbaum coordinated with Our Revolution, Bernie groups, and others. The goal was to get 15 to 20 volunteers to take the weekend off and knock on doors for 2 days. They knew it was a big ask, but after weeks of organizing combined with the opportunity to help the most popular candidate, they almost tripled their goal. 56 volunteers, ages 16 to 78. 14 cars, over 550 hours, and 4,500 doors knocked on. In the end, Bernie won the New Hampshire primary by 3,867 votes. That's 1.3%. Every vote matters. Every volunteer matters. Join a TYT Army event near you or learn how to organize one of your own. Go to tyt.com/army.
Doe will pay for your first share of stock. Doe is unlimited commission-free stock trades and great ideas from real traders. When you head to doe.com/TYT, your first share of stock is on them. Learn how you can become an owner, not just a consumer, at doe.com/TYT.
Hi, I'm Bartholomew Joseph Kyle. I do audio for the main show, The Young Turks. I also do audio for Post Game. I started in 2006. I met Cenk Uygur at the Iraq for Sale screening that was directed by Robert Greenwald. And watching that, I want to figure out a way to be part of something that's genuine and authentic.
Welcome back, TYT. I want to read a TYT Live that came in, and I want to address it. It's a very serious situation. Afro Lefty writes in and says, objectifying Nando Villa. Do I say your last name right?
Yeah, Villa's fine.
Okay, but it's Villa, right?
No, it's Villa.
It is Villa?
1 L.
Okay, sorry, good. All right, objectifying Nando, but if tables are turned and I start talking about how much of a snack Anna Kasparian is, then all of a sudden it's wrong. If that's wrong, I don't want you to be right.
Someone's been in quarantine for too long. Wow, Anna, this only gets
objectify
you guys,
away. You are opening a door that I don't know if you want to walk through.
I just thought it was a fun comment, and thank you. It's really sweet.
Feet Patreon is going to come in any second now.
Do you need more fan art? Is that because I was making a reference of fan art? I was like, all right, Anna needs more fan art. You guys get drawing right now. Draw it of her feet, then draw a separate photo of my corns. I'd really appreciate that.
God.
I'm here too, okay? My corns are hot.
Okay, I don't know what's more disgusting, that picture of Joe Biden kissing his teenage niece on the mouth, or your corns. Like, I just don't want to hear about any of that.
When I look at my corns, I just see Joe Biden kissing.
Oh God! All right. TYT Lives, more TYT Lives. Roxanne says, Anna Kasparian did get that guy to buy her shoes that one time. That was like my first week at TYT. We did a social experiment, and yes, a complete stranger bought me shoes.
Wow, that's a deep cut from that fan.
Huh?
That's a deep cut. First week? That's a long time fan.
Yeah, you are a long time fan, Roxanne. Thank you.
You don't have to turn on the red light.
Turn on the red light.
Walk the streets for money. You can go on camera now.
All right, Brett's gonna yell at me in a minute, okay, or a second. Alex Benitez says, I'm a Cuban who voted for Bernie in Florida.
Well done.
Yes, younger Cubans are certainly more open-minded toward candidates like Bernie. Lucky for me, I had voted super early for that shiz. All right, cool.
Is the shiz Bernie?
Yeah. Yes, but usually,
That's how we Miami people talk. Like,
oh yeah.
We're like, I voted for Bernie early. It was good.
Voted
like,
for
I voted the coronavirus. Yeah.
So you have a dethroned Pitbull. You're the new Mr. 305.
No one can dethrone Pitbull. Come on.
That's right. Dale. All right, let's move on. I'm having too much fun. Now that coronavirus and the reality of stop it. Okay, let's start that again. Now that the country is taking the threat of coronavirus seriously, and of course, this is a worldwide pandemic where other countries are really experiencing the ramifications and consequences of not acting early. We're seeing some of the price gouging that's happening. We're seeing what some private industry is doing in order to maintain its patents and its profits, even above saving human lives. And one perfect example of that is what's happening in Italy. So Italy's healthcare system has become overwhelmed with coronavirus patients. And so there are shortages of certain medical supplies that they need. And there were these two young men who realized, okay, well, we have a 3D printer and we could actually use that printer to create some of the products that we need. And so they need these valves, right? And so the valve typically costs about $11,000 from the medical device manufacturer, but these volunteers were able to print replicas for about $1, right? So first of all, in the context of this crisis, this is an incredible breakthrough, an important breakthrough. But even if we're not dealing with a global pandemic, this kind of technology can significantly lower the cost of healthcare.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. But let me keep going. So here's what the valves look like. So this is what they needed to print out using the 3D printer. The hospital in Italy was in need of the valves after running out while treating patients for COVID-19. The hospital's usual suppliers said they could not make the valves in time to treat the patients. So look, these enterprising individuals who-
Heroes.
Yes, they're heroes. So when these two gentlemen, I'm not gonna butcher their names, Christian and Alessandro, who work at this Italian startup, asked the manufacturer of the valves for blueprints that they can use to print these replicas. The company actually declined and then threatened to sue for patent infringement, okay? They did it anyway. So they found a way to print out these valves anyway. So far, the valves they made have worked on 10 patients as of March 14th. And by the way, they're not looking to profit from this. They are doing this to help their fellow Italians, their fellow citizens. The patients were people in danger of life. And we acted, period. We have no intention of profit on this situation. We are not going to use the designs or product beyond the strict need for us forced to act. We are not going to spread the drawing. So they're just saying like, we're not looking to like profit or take advantage of the situation. We just want to save lives. And that's what they're doing.
Brava, Christian, brava.
Yes.
If they were American, they'd be like,
you're in prison.
Like $8,000 a pop.
Yeah.
2 for 10 or 15. Yeah. No, I mean that's amazing. Obviously, I think they were probably just using the 3D printer to like print out little mini versions of themselves. So it's always fun to have a reason to use your 3D printer.
Yeah.
Well, putting aside that I can't wrap my mind around the concept of 3D printing, my brain hasn't evolved to that kind of stage yet.
It's because it's still in recovery mode from all of these high level ideas we talk about on the show.
Yeah.
But again, this just shows that how the logic of profit, the logic of the market for life necessary things is immoral.
Yeah.
It just is. These things should be determined by other social indicators that are not for profit. Like the guy who invented penicillin gave it away for free. Could have made him a rich man, but he gave it away for free. You know, these sort of heroes that come up every once in a while show us the absurdity of charging $11,000 for a valve that people need to survive. So yeah, hopefully like this can start to change people's minds. Like this kind of crisis can show you that things like healthcare, housing, the things that you need to subsist in this life, to put those to the logic of the market and profit is immoral.
Yeah, absolutely. And what happens now? You know, I mean, how much are the valves now going to cost going forward? Now that they've been totally owned by these two very generous guys, like $11,000. What are they gonna? Ragazzi. Are they gonna like lower it to? You know, 8,000, 7,000, like
no,
right.
they can't justify that cost. They can't justify anything more than $1, literally. And I would guess that this type of price gouging happens on a regular basis anyway. I don't think that it actually costs them anywhere near $11,000 to create those valves.
Yeah.
So, you know, just
friend
something
of the show,
to keep in
Martin
mind.
Shkreli.
Yeah.
You know, it is making the EpiPen like $1 billion.
That's exactly right. These are the price tags that we as Americans who pride ourselves on getting better deals, you know, 2 for 1, happy hour, whatever. We have no idea what hospitals are being charged and then in turn pass that along to insurance companies who then pass that along to buyers like ourselves. We have no idea. like how much a ventilator goes for or why, or how much it actually costs to make a ventilator, right? So we're completely in the dark when it comes to our healthcare system, and I think if we found out the reality, we would be shocked and appalled.
Definitely. Well, there's one other price gouging story that I want to share with you, so let's get right to it. It's Maynard's, right? Maynard's. Awesome. Okay, so US retailer Maynard's is accused of illegally raising prices on masks and bleach while the country comes to grips with coronavirus. This is a worldwide pandemic. People are losing their lives as a result of this, and it's really gross to see retailers take advantage of it to charge customers higher prices for products that they need. So according to The Hill, investigators from the Attorney General's office in Michigan found that Maynard's appears to be exploiting public fear about coronavirus through a systemic effort of raising prices. In a letter, the Attorney General said that the Jackson, Michigan Maynard's was initially listing the 121-ounce container of Clorox brand bleach at $4.47, which is what the manufacturer suggests at retail price. And then the AG found that at the register, the same 121-ounce container of Clorox bleach was $8.99.
Twice as much.
Twice as much, double the MSRP. Okay, so Dana Nessel, who's the Attorney General in Michigan, is doing great work in holding these retailers accountable. And also the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, has come out and said, like, no, I'm doing an executive order to ensure that no price gouging happens. So they have this regulation, no business or person can sell products grossly in excess of the purchase price at which they bought the product. Products cannot be sold or offered at a price that's more than 20% higher than what it was listed as of March 9th, unless the seller can justify the price, the higher price, due to an increase in the cost of bringing the product to market.
Yeah, price controls.
Yeah.
Great, the government can do that if they want.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really great that it's happening on a local level too, because it can be a model for other states.
Definitely.
I just want to see an Antiques Roadshow. This is gonna be
You could just end the sentence there.
I want to see Antiques Roadshow, but about like sanitizers and Clorox. Well, this bottle of Clorox, I found in my grandma's stash.
It could be good. Does Clorox go bad?
Yeah, like it could be worth. Is it worth more now? And then like an appraisal of the Clorox now in the pandemic. It'll be cute. Listen, something to pass the time.
Yeah. By the way, that actual show is. I like that show.
I love that show.
Yeah, I like those kinds of reality shows where you get to look at stuff and learn things about stuff, like history. And anyway, I'm talking too much. I'm rambling.
I like
now.
shows about stuff.
Yeah, I like beer.
You don't watch Love Is Blind?
Oh my God, I started watching Love Is Blind because my best friend urged me to. And it's like the train wreck that you can't look away from. It really is. I highly recommend it. Anyway, Nando, Francesca, you guys are rock stars. Thank you for being here with us, for doing the show with me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And for everyone else who's watching, we will have a post game today. Brett will be joining me, and we have a fun story prepared for you, so don't miss it. And Cenk will be joining in soon. Hopefully he will recover from his tooth infection as soon as possible. And we will be doing our show remotely, but we'll still do the show. We'll see you soon.
they failed us. And if you're not angry about that, Michael, and any of you out there, then you're damn wrong, because you should be angry. Young Turks.
But it was genuine. He was mad.
Cenk Uygur, known online as one of the Young Turks, isn't afraid to throw some punches.
3, 2, 1, fade up.
Cenk the Turk Uygur.
What kind of TV station is this? The whole point is for me to yell and scream and tell you what I think.
It was right out of like Wayne's World.
This guy on this little rinky-dink website is speaking truth to power. We've been averaging 600,000 views a day, beating most of the cable shows in America.
We're the largest online news show in the world. We're celebrating our 1 billionth view.
Television, we're coming.
More politics ahead with Cenk Uygur.
He knew that the MSNBC opportunity was an experiment.
And fill-in host beats CNN and headline news combined. At some point, they want to give me a show.
Every single year, that comes out of our paycheck. We put it in, and you're saying we were suckers.
When you, as a host, tells someone you're interviewing to shut up, that's going to raise a red flag.
That guy needed a tall glass of shut-up juice.
If President Obama's doing the wrong thing, I'm not going to tell you that he's doing the right thing so I can, quote, support him.
He says to me, "You won't believe the meeting that I just had."
The head of MSNBC talked to me.
And they want him off the air.
Cenk took an incredible risk.
We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media. The Democrats and the Republicans are here to screw you. And who on the air is saying it?
I wouldn't have done what he did.
That if I'm going to be a talk show host, I should be the biggest talk show host in the country. I don't think anyone else does it better. I don't think anyone's even close.
Before you know it, I'll be back on your TV doing a national show. I guarantee it.
Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian with you guys, ready for a rock and roll show?
We've never played instruments before, but we're gonna try for the first time right now.
My God, if Jesus came back, how much would the Republicans hate him? Jesus would come back and be like, no, I'm done with all the banks. And he said, now you have to give away all of your possessions to the poor. Steve King would be like, oh, Weezy, they're coming to get me. It's not about fighting amongst each other. It's about making sure we correct the political system so our government works for us and our representatives actually represent us. And unfortunately, not a lot of the rest of the media even understands that concept, but we do here.
Can't be pro-life and pro the death penalty.
They're afraid to do it because they're stuck in this, this lie. The Republicans are great with money and the economy, and then they don't spend all your money and take it from you. It's exactly what they do. Just say it.
Okay, we're about to have some fun on the show. Strap on. That's not a thing. She's gonna fall one of these days. One of these days she's gonna fall.
Okay. All right, we gotta do the story. This country is not run by the people for the people. It's run by corporations. It's run by weapons manufacturers. It's run by private military contractors.
We've been telling you that people care about policy, and people on TV, they're like, no, everybody just cares about gloss and shine and whether you're rolling up your sleeves well. But what's more impressive is policy, and that you should make equal note of that, and you most certainly have not. All right, back on the Young Turks. Joining me now is Jerry Mitchell. He's the legendary investigative reporter and the author of Race Against Time. A reporter reopens the unsolved murder case of the civil rights era. And Jerry, it's great to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and that's no exaggeration. Your work played a central role in bringing the killers to justice in the assassination of Medgar Evers, the firebombing of Vernon Dahmer, the 16th Street church bombing that killed 4 little girls in Birmingham. You won only 30 awards though, including the MacArthur Genius Grant and Columbia's John Chancellor Award. And if I kept going, we'd take up the whole show. So, Jerry, how did you get involved in those civil rights era cases to begin with? And how much after they happened did you pick up the story?
Well, I mean, it was 1989, January of '89, and I went to see the movie Mississippi Burning. I was assigned to cover it, and happened to be 2 FBI agents who investigated the case there. And I guess what I couldn't wrap my head around is there are more than 20 Klansmen involved in killing these 3 young men, James Chaney, Andy Goodman, Mickey Schwerner, and nobody had ever been prosecuted for murder. That was just something I just couldn't wrap my head around. Yeah. And really, it was woefully ignorant about the civil rights movement and all the violence attached to it. I mean, I knew some of it, but not much.
So that's back in '89. Obviously, the murders happened.
64
in Mississippi Burning case, and 63 with Medgar Evers, right, and the Birmingham bombing. So you got to go back at that point, 26, 25 years, etc. Who are you working for at the time?
At the time, and this whole time I was working on these cases, was working for the Clarion Ledger, which is a statewide newspaper in Mississippi. And what I didn't know when I began my journey was basically the role of the newspaper itself in some of these horrible things that happened in the past. Because the Clarion Ledger was a pretty racist newspaper. And so part of discovering some of these things from the past, the Mississippi Sovereignty Commission papers included that newspaper as well.
So I'm actually super interested in that. Did you grow up in Mississippi or no?
I actually grew up in East Texas, schizophrenic town of Texarkana. So that's where
okay,
I grew
gotcha.
Up, yeah.
So you go to the Clarion Ledger and go, hey, by the way, I'd like to look at a case from 25 years ago. Well, I'm surprised, and it might, by the way, unearth the fact that you guys were terribly racist. So how in the world did they even give you permission?
Well, it's not like I walked out and walked in one day and said all that. It was more one story at a time. It was like one thing led to another. The Sovereignty Commission stuff was about a month later after the movie that I ran across that and began to open my eyes to a lot of horrible things that happened.
What's the Sovereignty Commission?
It was a state segregationist spy agency in Mississippi that basically infiltrated civil rights groups, spread propaganda, sent speakers black and white up north to talk about how wonderful segregation was. And it was essentially kind of the state version of the White Citizens Council.
And how long was that around?
It started not long after the White Citizens Council was established. And then it ended in 1977, and when the Mississippi legislature officially abolished them. But this is the part you'll love. So they said the Mississippi legislature sealed all those records, more than 132,000 pages of records, and that they sealed for 50 years. So my first thought, of course, when I found that out was, well, there's something in there, right?
Oh yeah. You don't seal something for 50 years.
Exactly.
Unless you really don't want it getting out. That's like when Trump came out of the meeting with Putin, was like, and told the translator, give me all your notes. Like if you thought there was wonderful stuff in there, you wouldn't care to confiscate the notes.
You want to keep it. So that's what they did. So I began to develop sources that had access to those files, began to leak me those files, and they show at the same time the state of Mississippi was prosecuting Byron D. LeBeckwith for murdering Medgar Evers. This other arm of the state, the Sovereignty Commission, was secretly assisting the defense, trying to basically help Beckwith get acquitted.
Wow, so back in the 60s, when they're going after
64,
when they're going after the killer, the government is secretly helping the defense instead of the prosecution.
Bingo.
Jesus. Okay, so
and there was other stuff too, but that's one.
Yeah. So are those old records? Was that your main source for unearthing a lot of what happened?
Some of the early stuff, and then that led to other stuff, FBI records and other things I was able to get my hands on.
So when you find that information out about them, what happens next? You write it, presumably you write it in the paper.
I wrote a story, and then one of the people who had read the documents eventually at some point at least gave me a hint. And basically he told me that it involved murder. And so that kind of put me down that trail. I wanted to get those records and eventually loaded up the back of my little Honda with 2,400 pages of the records. And so we ended up doing this huge series of stories including a story about the newspaper itself.
So, okay, then all this stuff comes out. Now, again, there's a number of different cases here.
Yeah, there's several different things.
Yeah, but in the Byron De La Beckwith case,
It gets reopened. It gets reopened and reprocessed.
So that's not Mississippi burning. Just so I want everybody to be clear. That's Medgar Evers killing. Medgar Evers, the civil rights leader. Della Beckwith kills him.
I went and interviewed him.
Okay, so before I get to how the case got reopened, so you go to interview him, what happens there?
So I went to interview him, this was in April of 1990. I spent about 6 hours with him, absolutely the most racist person I ever spent serious time with. N-word this, N-word that, very anti-Semitic, and believed it
really?
Yeah, well, no shock on any of this, but believed all non-white people were what he called mud people. He was a part of Christian identity. I'm sure you know about that, and pretty vile, reprehensible beliefs. And so, I got done talking to him, and it was dark, and he insisted on like walking me out to the car, and I'm like, really, that's okay.
I can't wait to leave, but definitely not with you.
And so he gets me, he walks me out the car and gets me out there and says, if you write positive things about white Caucasian Christians, God will bless you. If you write negative things about white Caucasian Christians, God will punish you. God does not punish you directly. Several individuals will do it for him.
Oh, he said that to you?
Yeah, he said that to me.
Wow, and you printed that?
Not at that point, actually. But I did get rid of the sandwich his wife gave me.
Okay, so how do they? At what point did they reopen the case?
They reopened it actually with my early stories. It was a series of events. I wrote the story, and then Merle Evers asked for the case to be reopened. The Jackson City Council asked for the case to be reopened. So by the end of October of '89, that case was reopened.
So for the folks who don't know, what wound up happening to Della Beckwith?
So Byron Della Beckwith was indicted for the murder of Medgar Evers in December of 1990 and was convicted because of court machinations. The trial wasn't until 4 years later, and he was convicted February 5th, 1994, and sentenced to life in prison.
That's wonderful. I lost track after that. Did he die in prison?
He did. He died in 2001 in prison.
Okay, that's fantastic. Okay, then after you do that case, do you move on to Mississippi burning?
Well, after Byron Della Beckwith got indicted, these cases kind of overlapped slightly. After Byron Della Beckwith got indicted, all these families, for obvious reasons, say, well, wait a minute, what about my father or my siblings or whatever? And so the Vernon Damer family came to me at that point, and he was a NAACP leader in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, which is about an hour and a half south of Jackson. Totally dedicated to voting rights. Some people probably know who he is or have heard of him, but he basically died defending his family in a Klan attack. Like they set the house on fire, began firing the guns in the house. He woke up, grabbed his shotgun, and ran from the house and fired at the Klansmen so his family could escape safely out the back window. But unfortunately, the flames of the fire seared his lungs, and he died later that day.
Yeah, so let's talk about the broader picture then, because I don't.
Yeah, we could go down to each of these cases.
And all the cases are amazing. I mean, they killed those innocent little girls in the church.
Girls.
Yeah, and so they're terrorists. I mean, that's literally terrorists.
They should have been using that term. It's only recently you're starting to hear that term used for. It's like someone from here wasn't a terrorist, but if they're from overseas, then they're a terrorist.
Yes. No, the Klan is clearly the biggest terrorist organization in American history. There's no question about that. The only people who wouldn't admit that are racists. I'm keeping it real. So I don't know why you would even want to defend the Klan. I mean, they lit things on fire, they bombed things, they shot people they disagreed with politically.
Absolutely.
It had also not only a political component, but a religious component.
Right.
So there's no ands, ifs, or buts, and certainly the largest we've ever had in this country, not even close. Okay, so, but it's hard for people to wrap their minds around how it was back in Mississippi back in the day.
Yeah.
And back in the day is not that long ago.
It's in my lifetime.
Oh yeah, and in 1960, I was born in 70, right?
Right.
And so the commission gets shut down in 77. Until then, they're still, secretly helping every racist they can in Mississippi, even if they know, or because they know they lynched black people. So, and now people say, oh no, it's magically all gone away. But
it hasn't really gone away. I mean, that's the problem with it. The hate hasn't really gone away.
Yeah, so let's catch up to present day in a minute. But first, I'm super interested in the Clarion Ledger's role in it.
Sure. Well, the Clarion Ledger was, like I said, was very much a racist newspaper in the 50s and the 60s. And then it was owned by the Hederman family, and then Ray Hederman came in the 70s and really began to turn that paper around. Ray now owns the New York Review of Books. That's what he runs now, but he was the one who really helped turn the paper around. So the paper had turned around, substantially by the time I arrived in '86.
So obviously they let you do the stories, and it even exposed some of the things they had done in the past. But back when they were a racist paper,
right?
Did they admit they were a racist paper?
No, of course not.
No. Okay. So what would they do? What they just would?
I'll give you an example. Like for example, the March on Washington in August of 1963. The day after, I guess AP had a photo of kind of some of the trash around or whatever after and literally they, on the front page, they printed a photograph of the trash and it said, and I apologize for how offensive it is, but it said Negro trash taken out of Washington. That was literally the headline.
Yeah, so it's almost as if there might be people on a certain cable channel right now talking about how immigrants bring in too much trash and that they're dirty and that the trash needs to be taken out.
Well,
yeah, interesting. I'm sure totally coincidental parallel. Yes, that's Fox News and their host talking about immigrants. So, but back then, if you said to them, "Hey, look, you're painting African Americans as trash, etc." My guess is like some folks in the media today, like, "How dare you?" No, I'm just covering them. There was trash. There was trash, right? And so
it was pretty awful. It was pretty racist. So, and that's far from, I could give many examples of racism.
Give us one more, because look, we talk a lot on the show today about present day propaganda, and it's not just Fox News.
No.
So when the mainstream media says that they like Joe Biden better, they don't say they like Joe Biden better. They say Joe Biden is more electable. They don't say they dislike Bernie Sanders because he would raise their individual taxes for every cable news host. They say Bernie Sanders is socialist and likes Fidel Castro, even though he says the same thing as Barack Obama about Fidel Castro in Cuba. And Fox News doesn't say we loathe immigrants because they're brown.
Right.
They say they bring in, they're potential terrorists and they bring in trash. So I'm curious, what did they say and what did they mean back in the day?
Well, I mean, here's another example. I mean, this is like pretty awful too. They, for example, when James Meredith was admitted to the University of Mississippi in fall of '62, one of the columnists for the Clarion Ledger actually wrote something along the lines of that the federal marshals were fighting each other over who was going to get to give Meredith a bath. Like, this is literally what they wrote in a column. And then another column, which actually ran in the sister paper, the Jackson Daily News, compared civil rights activists to chimpanzees. I mean, this was common. I'm not telling you something that was uncommon in those days.
Yeah. And then a candidate came by many decades later and said, in the good old days, these kind of protesters would have been taken out on stretchers and maybe given a bath, right? He didn't add that part, but so here we are again. Every once in a while now, folks without this historical context, and it's almost never talked about, people know it existed. It's not like you don't hear about civil rights era in the history books in college and in high school. You do, but you don't get to know a lot of uncomfortable details.
I think that's true, because people reduce it down. They make it, Rosa Parks sat down, Dr. King stood up, and African Americans got their rights. I mean, that's what it gets reduced down to. And people don't know their history. They don't really know. It's amazing how many people have read my book so far, and that's what they've responded. They've said, black and white, have said, I didn't know all this happened. Even someone in the civil rights movement who read my book said, I thought I knew this.
So to what degree were African Americans brutalized? Was it, hey, there was one crazy guy and he went after Medgar Evers, and there was 3 crazy guys and they went after da-da-da?
It was a campaign against African Americans. They were purposefully, I mean, you really have to go back in time to the history of how this all originated. It was basically to reestablish of white supremacy in like 1890 Constitution was a rebellion against Reconstruction, establishment of the 1890 Constitution, and basically the idea behind it, and they said it out loud, was they were going to reinstitute white supremacy and basically disenfranchise African Americans. They said this out loud. That's why they set up the Constitution of Mississippi that had poll taxes, passed a state law that removed everybody from the voting rolls so then they could keep them from getting back on the voting rolls, and had a constitutional quiz, different things that were kind of, the old line of how many bubbles in a bar of soap, those are the kind of questions sometimes that the clerks would ask to keep them from getting on the voting rolls. So if you understand that context and history, it was a long time. It was a long period of time that this was going on.
Purging the voter rolls based on names and other things. They wouldn't do that today. Oh, right, they do it today. Okay, anyway. So, but I'm curious, 1890, Mississippi says, yeah, we're for white supremacy.
Right.
What does the federal government do? Because that's illegal, like some of the things
it was totally illegal, but the US Supreme Court said okay to the Mississippi Constitution. It actually got challenged constitutionally. And the US Supreme Court basically said okay, just like and it was a year before Plessy versus Ferguson, which we know said separate but equal is fine. Of course, it was never equal, but anyway, that was
right. So when the establishment, including the United States Supreme Court, says something's okay, whether it's racism or corporations being human beings able to bribe politicians, then it's okay, and everything goes along for 100 years of brutality.
Right.
And so, how much were African Americans brutalized in Mississippi in that time?
Well, Mississippi had more lynchings of African Americans than any other state. I think the Brian Stevens, his group, I think they came up with a total of about 4,000 lynchings of African Americans between basically Reconstruction and Civil Rights Movement.
What would people get lynched for?
Looking at a white woman,
whether they did or didn't.
Whether they did or didn't, or there were false accusations all the time. There were many times where people didn't do anything, literally.
So if you're living in a situation where the law is against you, the government is against you, the courts are against you, and you could be lynched for anything, you would live in perpetual terror.
Yes.
Because if I go out today and I accidentally look the wrong way, or even if I didn't, they might. And by the way, if you don't know the details of lynchings, I've talked about on the show before, and it's the most grotesque thing you'll ever hear. I'm gonna tell you because you should know. Sometimes they would just hang them. Sometimes they would hang and burn them. Sometimes they'd have a picnic around the hanging and the burning.
They would take photographs. They would take souvenirs. That was the other thing.
And if you don't know what the souvenirs were, it was body parts. That from the charred bodies. And they would keep it at home. Hey, this is the black person we burned to death at the picnic. But those things are too uncomfortable to talk about, so nobody talks about them. And that's why these cases also were swept under the rug. And then you came along, and some people have described you as a quote pain in the ass.
That's fine.
And a loose cannon. That's why I love the work that you've done. Because until a pain in the ass comes along and says, no, you're not supposed to sweep this under the rug. What happened was an outrage.
Exactly.
Nothing ever gets done. In fact, speaking of Birmingham, this quote's been going around lately, and I've been part of the people who've pushed it. MLK wrote in his letter from a Birmingham jail that the white moderate was worse than the KKK and the White Citizens Council.
That's what he said.
That's right, because therefore a negative piece of maintaining order as opposed to a positive piece brought to you by justice. Right. And so, seeking justice. I mean, Jerry, you're being such a loose cannon by doing that, making people uncomfortable. So now let's talk about today because we're gonna run out of time. So that legacy, and this is the heritage that some people say they're so proud of, right? That is still around today, but of course people don't get lynched in that brutal way that they did, etc. So what remains of that heritage?
Well, I think the hate remains, and hate is rooted in fear a lot of times, and so that's what you really see a lot of right now is kind of the rhetoric of fear that's taking place. And when people fear, they dehumanize. When you dehumanize people, you give yourself permission to get rid of them either figuratively or literally. You're doing society a favor. If they're a quote monster, or however you depict them, make them less than human in some way.
So when I interviewed David Duke, I thought he was going to go on a warpath against Latinos and Muslims because that was back in 2015 when Trump's talking a lot about that and he was supporting Trump, but he didn't. He actually mainly focused on Jews.
Yeah.
And I was taken aback by that, and that was of course foreboding. And as we saw, that foreboding sign turned into Charlottesville and the synagogue shootings.
Yeah, there's been a real rise in anti-Semitic, violence and threats.
So when you look at the state of Mississippi now, is it still the main focus African Americans because that's what it was for so long? Or is the hatred, the fear now shifting towards Latino immigrants, Muslims, Jews? Any sense of that?
Well, the populations are just very low for Latino and the Jewish population is pretty low in Mississippi. So not that they haven't had that. I mean, the Klan kind of turned on the Jews in the 60s after kind of the African Americans were targeted. They began to bomb synagogues, began to bomb Jewish leaders' homes. So that was a part of that legacy as well.
Right. So there's still the distrust of African Americans. And I gotta end on this.
Sure.
It's amazing to me the stereotypes in this country. They're usually the exact opposite of reality, right? So the horribly offensive term now, Indian giver. Wait, we violated every treaty we did with Native Americans, but then we called them Indian givers. They say Mexicans are lazy. Wait, they're doing the hardest work in the country. So African Americans, they say, are violent after they lynched them, enslaved them. And we haven't even gotten to the rape because that's the most uncomfortable part.
Right.
Even, and then and you can go on forever for all the brutality that was done to African Americans in this country. But because of the propaganda passed down from generation to generation, and yes, the press, and yes, the government in places like Mississippi, do they still really believe that the African Americans are the violent ones?
I think a certain core of people do. I think there are a certain core of people that believe that. Whether they would state it openly in this age or not, I don't know. But I think they inherently distrust. There's this inherent distrust of African Americans. There's just a racial divide there.
If an alien landed on Earth and they said, "Wait, which one should distrust the other one?" Right?
Exactly.
Like, wait, how is this a question? Of course, African Americans should distrust the white folks in Mississippi, given the history, the legacy, and what's happening today. But no, it's reverse. White people in Mississippi, not all of them, by the way, not all of them, of course, right? But unfortunately, there's still a culture of like, I don't know about those African Americans. They're a little dangerous, and we can't trust them.
I think, like I said, it goes back to fear. And for example, Sam Bowers, who's the head of the Klan in Mississippi, talked about before Freedom of Summer about there being an invasion. And of course, that's exactly what the guy in El Paso supposedly went and did. He's protecting us from an invasion. So I find it's interesting the language being similar to the same.
All right, you guys, you got to check out Race Against Time. That's Jerry's book about all these cases. It's amazing, and it's by all accounts thrilling. Like it's almost like you're in a John Grisham novel, but it's actual real life, and of course, it's also tragic. And it's an important story that you should know, and I guarantee you will find things in there that you did not know. So Jerry Mitchell,
thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it very much.
Not only for coming on here, but for doing all these stories and for being a great journalist that uncovered the truth and brought us some justice.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.